The order came at 11:47 p.m., not from an enemy commander, from inside their own system. Someone with clearance, someone with rank, someone who had shaken hands with the men he was now sending to die. General Marcus Holt looked at the satellite coordinates on his screen, looked at the 20 names on that extraction list, and typed 4 words into a secure terminal, "Let them burn there." He closed the laptop, poured himself a drink, and went to sleep. 20 American soldiers were about to be surrounded, cut off and eliminated not by the enemy, but by the people who were supposed to bring them home. Before you go any further, if stories like this hit you somewhere deep, somewhere real, please subscribe to this channel. Drop a comment right now with the city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to that frozen mountain and to the one person who refused to let those soldiers disappear. The radio had been silent for 6 years, not broken, not forgotten, silent by design. Captain Ethan Walker had served 11 years in the United States Army. He had been in Fallujah when the streets caught fire. He had been in the Korangal Valley when the helicopters couldn't land for 3 days straight. He had buried 7 men he called brothers, stood at their graves in his dress uniform, and kept every single one of their names tucked somewhere behind his ribs where the grief never fully left. He was not a man who scared easily. But tonight, crouched inside a frozen trench on the northern face of a mountain with no name on any public map, Captain Ethan Walker was scared. Not the sharp, clean kind of fear that made a soldier move faster and shoot straighter. The slow, spreading kind. The kind that settled in your stomach like ice water and told you that the math had already stopped working in your favor. 20 men, 4 of them wounded. One of them Sergeant Danny Okafor with a sucking chest wound that no field dressing was going to hold for much longer. Walker Lieutenant James Reyes pressed up beside him, his face dark with cold and dirt. "Command isn't answering. I know, it's been 40 minutes. I know, James. Channel's not just dead." It's like Reyes paused, choosing his words carefully. It's like someone cut it on purpose. Walker looked at him. Reyes was 29 years old. He had a daughter who had just turned 3. He had shown Walker a photo of her birthday cake 2 days before the mission launched, pink frosting, a little plastic tiara on top. Walker had made a joke about it. They had both laughed. Walker did not look away from Reyes's face when he answered. "I know," he said for the 3rd time, because he did know. Deep down, in the part of him that had spent 11 years reading situations the way other men read weather, he knew. This was not a technical failure. Equipment failed with static and error codes and system alerts. This was silence. Clean, complete, deliberate silence. The kind of silence that only happened when someone on the other end made a choice. Someone had chosen not to pick up. Outside the trench, the mountains breathed cold air that turned every exhale into white mist. The enemy was out there. Walker had counted at least 3 separate contact points in the last hour, each one probing, testing, circling. They were not attacking yet. They were waiting. Like they knew something his unit didn't know. Like they had been told something. Private First Class Marcus Webb, 22 years old, and still the best radio technician Walker had ever seen, crawled up from the far end of the trench. His hands were shaking. "Not from the cold, Captain. I've been scanning every authorized frequency we have. Nothing. I tried the backup relay. Nothing. I even tried the emergency beak protocol, the one that's supposed to auto-connect to regional command regardless of signal disruption. And Webb swallowed. Nothing. It's like we don't exist on any network they're monitoring." The words landed like something physical, like we don't exist. Walker let that sit for exactly 5 seconds. Then he made a decision. "Webb, your kit. Bring it here." Webb scooted over, the communications pack rattling against his vest. Walker unzipped the outer pouch and began moving through channels systematically, the way an old radio operator had once shown him, not scanning but stepping, moving one precise interval at a time, listening at each frequency before advancing. The soldiers around him watched without speaking. Even the wounded ones had gone quiet. Sergeant Okafor, propped against the frozen dirt wall with his hand pressed to his chest, tracked Walker with his eyes and said nothing. Walker moved through 37 channels, 40, 45, nothing but static and the howl of wind across the ridgeline. Then a story. It came back to him the way old things did. Not in a rush, but in a drift, like smoke coming under a door. His 2nd year of deployment, a bar in Bagram. An old communications sergeant named Harold Purcell, retired, leather-faced, 3 wars behind him, who drank bourbon and talked about things that younger soldiers weren't supposed to know about yet. "Every system has a ghost layer," Purcell had said that night, turning his glass in a slow circle on the bar top. "Frequencies that get open for a mission, and never properly closed down. Black channels. Nobody monitors them. Nobody acknowledges them. They just sit there. Walker had asked the obvious question. Why don't they shut them down? Purcell had smiled. Not warm. Because sometimes the only way a man gets home is if someone on the other end picks up a signal that wasn't supposed to exist. He had given Walker a 7-digit frequency number. Walker hadn't written it down. He hadn't needed to. That kind of information delivered by a man with that kind of eyes didn't leave. It settled somewhere permanent. Walker looked at the frequency dial. 7 digits. He found himself entering them before he finished deciding whether to. Webb watched him. Captain, that's not unauthorized. I know what it is. The channel opened, and the static was different. Different how, he couldn't have explained. Not cleaner, not louder, but different the way a room feels different when it has a person in it rather than when it's empty. Something alive in the silence, something listening. Walker picked up the handset. He thought about the 20 men behind him. He thought about Danny Okafor's chest wound. He thought about Reyes's daughter with her pink frosting birthday cake. Go 7. This is Raven Actual. His voice was steady. He had spent 11 years making sure his voice stayed steady when it mattered. If anyone can hear this, we need assistance. We are 20 personnel, 4 wounded, position compromised, communication with command severed. If anyone can hear this, we need help. He released the button. Static, 10 seconds. 20, he counted. He couldn't stop himself. Every second that passed was another second. The enemy tightened the circle. 30 seconds. It's dead, sir, Webb said quietly. 40 seconds. Reyes put a hand on Walker's shoulder, and Walker knew what that meant. They needed to move. They needed to make a decision. They couldn't sit in a trench counting seconds on a channel that hadn't been active in 6 years while the enemy. The static shifted. Every man in that trench felt it before they heard it, the way the air changes before lightning. And then a voice came through the handset. A woman's voice, low, controlled, unhurried. The kind of calm that didn't come from inexperience. It came from someone who had been in so many bad situations that even a very bad situation no longer changed the tempo of their breathing. Go 7 listening. Who needs me? Nobody moved. Sergeant Okafor with the chest wound had his eyes wide open. Private Webb had stopped breathing. Lieutenant Reyes, hard-edged James Reyes, who had never in Walker's memory shown visible surprise about anything, was staring at the handset like it had just spoken in a language that had no right to exist. Walker brought the handset back to his mouth. Ghost 7. This is Captain Ethan Walker, Raven Actual. We are a reconnaissance unit, 20 personnel pinned at grid. Don't transmit your grid. Her voice cut across his, not rudely, not with urgency, but with complete, flat certainty. Not on any frequency. Not even this one. Walker stopped. Do you understand me, Captain? Yes, good. Don't tell me where you are. Tell me what you can see, he blinked. What I can see. Ridgelines, structures. Anything that gives me orientation without giving away your exact position. You have 30 seconds before someone gets curious about this channel. Walker looked at Reyes. Reyes looked back at him. 20 years of combined military experience between them, and neither of them had anything useful to say. So Walker described what he could see. The broken antenna tower at 2 o'clock. The collapsed structure at the base of the eastern ridge that looked like it had been a communications outpost before something leveled it. The rock formation to the north that locals had probably used as a navigation point for generations, shaped roughly like a man's profile facing west. He finished speaking. Silence for 3 seconds. Then I know exactly where you are. Something in Walker's chest tightened, not with relief. Something more complicated than relief. Go 7, who are you? Right now, I am the person keeping you alive. That's enough information. That's not, Captain Walker. Her voice shifted, not harder but more direct, like a door closing. I am going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, because the wrong answer gets you killed. All right. What extraction point were you given? Walker glanced at Reyes, who had been following the conversation from inches away. Extraction point Sierra, Walker said. The forward team was supposed to mark it with stop. That word landed like a flat stone on still water. Hard, clean, final. Do not go there. That's our approved extraction. Command designated captain. Listen to me very carefully. A pause. Brief. Command is not coming to bring you home at extraction point Sierra. Whoever is waiting at Sierra is not your rescue. Walker felt the cold go deeper, into the bones, below the cold. You're saying the extraction point has been compromised. I'm saying more than that. Another pause, and he could hear something in the background of her transmission wind. Close wind. She was outside, somewhere high. I am saying that Extraction Point Sierra was chosen because it has no cover, no exit routes, and no elevation advantage for your unit. It has been chosen so that 20 men walk into an open space and cannot walk out again. The trench was absolutely silent. Okafor had stopped looking at the handset. He was looking at the ceiling of frozen dirt above him, and his jaw was working, and Walker understood what he was thinking. Because Walker was thinking the same thing, this cannot be true. But his gut, the part of him that 11 years of hard experience had trained to recognize the shape of truth, even when the truth was the worst possible thing, his gut had already accepted it. How do you know this? He asked. Because I've seen it before. A very brief silence. I've lived it B7. You need to move. You need to move right now, Captain, because in approximately 4 minutes, the unit that has been circling your position from the eastern ridge is going to change from observation to engagement. I have been watching them change position for the last 23 minutes. I know their pattern. And right now their pattern says 4 minutes. Reyes grabbed Walker's arm, didn't say anything, didn't have to. Walker looked at Webb. Okafor, can he move? Webb looked down the trench. Okafor had heard. He was already pushing himself to sit. I can move, Okafor said. And his voice was rough and slightly wet and completely certain. Walker made a decision. Go 7. If we move, which way? Northwest. There is a slope that looks impassable. It is not. There is a path that locals have used for 40 years that your satellite imagery did not pick up because it runs under an overhang. You will not see it until you are standing at the entrance, which is marked by 3 flat stones stacked vertically against the cliff face. And you know this because I have walked it, she said. More than once. Move now, Captain Walker. You have 3 minutes 50 seconds. He looked at Reyes. Reyes was already turning to the unit. And just like that, on the word of a woman whose name they didn't know, whose face they had never seen, whose existence was supposed to be classified as impossible, 20 American soldiers climbed out of their trench and started moving northwest. Walker kept the handset pressed to his ear, kept the channel open, kept listening to the low, controlled breathing on the other end that told him Ghost 7 was still there, was still watching, was still doing something that he couldn't see from where he stood, but that he felt in the way the darkness around them stayed quiet longer than it should have. They found the 3 stacked stones, exactly where she said. They found the path beneath the overhang, narrow, barely 2 men across, which meant it would slow them down, but also meant that anyone pursuing them could only come 2 across as well. Walker noted that. She had known that too. She had picked a route that turned their smaller number from a weakness into something manageable. Behind them, exactly 4 minutes after she had given the warning, the eastern ridge lit up with the sound of a firefight, not aimed at them. A firefight that made no sense from where Walker was standing because his unit was here, not there, and yet the shooting was there, intense and urgent, and someone on the other end of it was retreating, regrouping, realizing their target was gone. Someone had hit the enemy position from another angle. Someone had bought them exactly the time they needed. Ghost 7, Walker said into the handset. Keep moving, no pause. Like she had been waiting for him to call. That was you. Keep moving, Captain. How many of them were there? A beat, then dry as the winter air, enough to make it interesting. Keep moving. Okafor was being supported between 2 privates now. His breathing was audible. Walker watched him with one eye and the path ahead with the other, and he did what soldiers did. He subdivided the problem into pieces small enough to carry 1 step at a time. Move northwest. Follow the overhang. Trust the voice on the radio. He had trusted stranger things on worse nights. He had never trusted something that felt more simultaneously impossible and completely bone-deep right. Ghost 7. He kept his voice low. The path was narrow enough that the sound didn't carry far. You said you've seen this before, lived it before. What does that mean? Silence. Long enough that he wondered if the channel had dropped. Then it means someone I trusted made the same kind of decision that someone in your command made tonight. And I was the only one who came back. Her voice did not change. That was the part that hit hardest. It didn't waver. It didn't soften. It came out steady, like something that had been said so many times in the privacy of memory that the emotion had worn smooth. 7 people went in. I was the only one who came out. And the official report said we were all dead. Walker stopped walking. The soldier behind him bumped into his back and he barely felt it. The official report said you were. Yes, a pause. It's a strange thing to read about yourself. Reyes had circled back and was standing at Walker's shoulder, reading his face. Walker. Will found his voice. How long ago? 6 years. 6 years. the frequency that sat silent for 6 years. The call sign removed from every accessible database. The legend that soldiers only whispered about after midnight. Ghost 7, Walker said. What is your real name? Silence stretched between them. Up ahead, one of the privates hissed quietly. They had reached a fork in the path, 2 directions, no obvious choice in the darkness. Left, Ghost 7 said before he even asked. Like she could see them. Maybe she could. Left, Walker relayed, and the column moved, and Reyes fell back into step behind him, and the handset was warm in Walker's frozen fingers, and the voice on the other end stayed quiet, and he didn't push the question again. Not yet. They moved for another 20 minutes. She guided them through 2 more decision points, a collapsed section of path they had to cross one at a time, and a gap that required a rope assist that somehow Corporal Diaz had in his pack, which meant whoever designed this escape route had also known Diaz carried extra rope, which was impossible, which was starting to feel like the least impossible thing about this entire night. Okafor was struggling. Walker could hear it. He didn't say anything about it, and neither did the 2 men holding him up, because soldiers didn't narrate each other's struggle out loud when they could just carry more of the weight instead. Go 7, Walker spoke quietly, our wounded man. He's not going to make the full distance at this pace. I know. She had been quiet for 12 minutes. He realized he had counted that too. There is a shelter point. 40 years ago, it was used by mountain people in the winter. It is not on your maps. It has 2 walls and a roof, and it will hold 20 men out of the wind. Your medic can work there. Medic is Specialist Chen. He's got limited supplies. Tell Chen that the chest wound will need more pressure on the upper left intercostal space specifically. He's been applying general pressure. The entry angle means the specific point is 3 centimeters higher than standard placement. Another full stop. Reyes this time was the one who reached out and put a hand on Walker's arm, steadying him. How do you Walker started? Tell him, Ghost 7 said. Firm, patient. We can talk about it later. Right now, tell him. Walker relayed the instruction to Chen, watched the young specialist's face go through a rapid series of recalibrations, surprise, resistance, professional skepticism, and then watched him shift his hands. Watched Okafor's breathing change, not perfect, fixed, but better, measurably, immediately better. Chen looked up at Walker with eyes that were asking the same question everyone else was silently asking. Who is she? Walker had no answer. He had only the handset, only the frequency, only the voice. They reached the shelter point. 2 walls and a partial roof, exactly described, carved into a rock face in a way that would be completely invisible from more than 15 feet away unless you knew where to look. They filed in, all 20 of them, tight and quiet and grateful in the way that people are grateful when they stop believing they're going to die and start tentatively believing they might not. Chen worked on Okafor. The other soldiers settled into positions, some watching the entrance, some watching each other. A few who had reached the point of exhaustion where the body simply stopped negotiating and demanded payment. Webb sat with the communications pack in his lap, running his hands over it the way some men ran rosary beads. Walker sat with his back against the cold stone wall and held the handset close and spoke quietly. Still there? Still here, she said. You've been watching us the whole time. Yes. From where? A small pause. He could almost hear the decision being made. High enough. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. But there was something different in her voice. What's almost like the edge of something that in different circumstances might have been humor. Like someone who had forgotten she was allowed to be dry and wry and human and had just briefly remembered. Walker looked around at his men, at Okafor being tended to, at Reyes standing at the narrow entrance with his rifle ready and his eyes forward, at Webb, who was 22 and frightened and holding together with both hands. Ghost 7, Walker said. Yes, I need to ask you something. You've been asking me things all night, Captain. This one's different. He paused. The extraction point. Sierra, you said it was a trap. You said someone in our command structure set it up. Do you know who? The silence that followed was longer than any of the previous ones. It had weight. The kind of silence that tells you the person on the other end is not deciding whether to answer. They are deciding how much of the answer they can carry once they give it to you. I have a name, she said finally, but giving you a name without giving you everything else that goes with it that gets you killed in a different way. A slower way. Give me what you can. The mission your unit was running, what were you told it was for? Forward reconnaissance. Identifying insurgent communication routes in the northern corridor. And what did you actually find? Walker hesitated. 2 days into the mission, they had found something they hadn't been looking for. a cache of documentation, digital files on hardware that had no business being in a mountain hideout, financial records, communication logs, American names appearing in places American names had no reason to appear. He had reported it up the chain. He had been told to leave the hardware in place and continue the mission. He had followed the order. He shouldn't have. He understood that now, sitting in the dark, completely clear-eyed about the thing he had chosen not to be clear-eyed about 2 days ago. We found documentation, he said. Yes, her voice was very quiet. You found exactly what they were afraid someone would find. And the moment you reported it, you became a problem. And their solution to problems, she stopped. Their solution to problems is what happened to my unit 6 years ago. The shelter was silent except for the wind outside and Chen's quiet instructions to Okafor and the sound of 20 men breathing carefully in the dark. Operation Silent Horizon, Walker said. The handset went absolutely still, not even the background wind. Like she had moved somewhere the wind couldn't reach, or like the mention of those 3 words had taken the breath out of her in a way that even 6 years of practice couldn't entirely prevent. Where did you hear that name? She asked. I found a reference. In the documentation cache, 2 days ago. Another silence. Then, Captain Walker, how much of what you found did you transmit to command? Walker went very cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Everything, he said. The pause that followed was the worst one of the night, because it meant they had known exactly what he had found, and they had known exactly what to do with the people who found it. And they had put that plan in motion before his unit had even had time to wonder why the extraction point seemed wrong. Go 7, Walker said quietly. I know. If they know what we found, I know, Captain. Tell me we're getting out of here. And for the first time, something changed in her voice. Not weakness, not doubt. Something that was almost the opposite of those things. Something that had been tempered by 6 years of being alone in cold mountains with nothing but the truth for company. You're getting out, she said. All of you. That is not a promise I make lightly. Walker believed her. Not because he had any logical reason to believe a voice on a ghost frequency from a soldier who was officially dead. Not because the mass supported it or command authorized it, or any of the systems he had trained 11 years to trust were still functioning. He believed her because he had heard 20 voices in his life that sounded exactly like hers in this moment. They belonged to people who had already been broken by a situation and had made their choice in the breaking had chosen, in the wreckage of whatever burned around them, to hold the line. Those voices didn't lie. They were past the point where lying bought you anything. He looked around the shelter one more time. 20 men, 4 wounded, 1 radio, 1 ghost. He made the same decision he had made when he pressed transmit on the forbidden frequency. Tell me what we do next, he said. Rest, she said. 2 hours. I'll tell you when to move. And in the meantime, a very small pause. In the meantime, Ghost 7 said, I'll keep the wolves from the door. And in the hours that followed those strange, suspended hours between what had almost happened and what still might, the men of Raven Actual rested in the shelter of 2 old stone walls, and outside in the mountains that no map named correctly, somewhere high and cold and invisible, a woman who had been erased from every record and every memory did the only thing she had ever known how to do. She watched. She waited. She kept them safe. And none of them, not even Walker with his handset held close, could see exactly where she was. But they could feel her. The way you feel a wall at your back in the dark. The way you feel the difference between a room that is empty and a room that has someone standing in it. Ghost 7 was there. And for 20 men who had very recently stopped believing they would see morning, that was more than enough. So Danny Okafor, chest wound, dressed and breathing steadier, reached out in the darks and the wrist and the private next to him and held on. The private, 18 years old, first deployment, still didn't fully believe where he was held back. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing to say that the contact didn't already say. Webb, at some point in the second hour, fell asleep with the communications pack still in his lap and his hands still resting on it. His head dropped to the side, and he slept the way young, exhausted people sleep completely, immediately, without transition. Reyes did not sleep. Reyes stood at the entrance and watched the darkness and turned once to look at Walker and gave him a very small nod. The kind that said, I am still here. I am still watching. Whatever this is, we are still in it together. Walker nodded back. Then he turned back to the handset and listened to the soft static of the ghost frequency, and somewhere in the second hour he thought he heard, very faintly, beneath the static and the wind, the distant crack of a single rifle shot. One shot, very far away, very deliberate, then silence again. and the darkness around the shelter stayed quiet. And nothing moved that should not move, and the wolves stayed away. Thank you, Walker said softly into the handset. The response, when it came, was barely above a whisper. Don't thank me yet, Captain. But he did anyway, silently to himself in the way that mattered most. He thanked her, and outside, in the mountains, in the dark, the woman who was supposed to be dead kept her eyes on the ridgeline and her hand on the rifle and her mind on the 20 names she had taken on as her own, the way she had taken on 7 names 6 years ago, the way she had carried those 7 names every single day since, the way she had told herself every single day since that 7 was as low as the number was ever going to go again. Not on her watch, not if she had anything left to give. And Olivia Hayes, because that was her name, even if no living record still held it, even if no active database still carried it, even if the official story said she was just another casualty of a mission that had never officially happened, Olivia Hayes still had quite a lot left to give. She intended to give every last bit of it. The 2 hours passed the way hard hours always passed, not quickly, not slowly, but in pieces. Each piece felt like its own small eternity. And then suddenly all the pieces were gone, and Walker was looking at the luminescent hands of his watch, and it was 347, and Ghost Seven's voice came through the handset like she had never stopped talking, like she had simply been waiting for the exact right moment to continue a sentence she started 2 hours ago. Captain Walker, it's time. He was already awake. He was not sure he had slept at all. He had spent the 2 hours in a state that was not sleep and was not quite wakefulness either, something in between, where the mind runs quiet loops and the body stays still, and part of you keeps listening even when there is nothing to hear. He sat up, looked around the shelter. Most of the men were already stirring, the way soldiers stir, not gradually, not with the slow, warm unfurling of a civilian waking up safe in a bed, but suddenly, completely, all at once, eyes open and hands moving before the rest of the brain catches up. Reyes was still at the entrance. He looked at Walker and gave a short nod. Still clear, still quiet. Okafor, Walker asked quietly. Chen appeared from the back of the shelter. He looked exhausted in the particular way that medics looked exhausted, not just tired but depleted, like he had been drawing from a reserve he hadn't known he had and was only now discovering its limits. Stable. The pressure adjustment helped, more than it should have, honestly. He can move slowly. He needs a real surgical team in the next 6 hours. 6 hours. Walker did the math. Every decision he had made in the last 2 hours had been based on the math, even when the math was terrible. Ghost 7, he said into the handset. Our critical wounded needs surgical intervention in 6 hours. Does your route account for that? Your route gets you to an intermediate point in 90 minutes where I have made arrangements, she said. At that point, you will have options you do not have right now. What kind of arrangements? A pause that was not hesitation. It was the pause of someone selecting information carefully. The way a surgeon selects instruments, not everything on the tray, just exactly what is needed right now. The kind that cost favors I've been saving for 6 years, she said. Move your unit northwest along the upper path. Do not descend toward the Valley Road. The Valley Road is being watched. By who? By people who were told your unit might try to use it. Her voice stayed level, completely level. The people who arranged tonight have contingency plans. They expected you to find an alternate route. They just did not expect the route you're taking. Because they don't know about you, Walker said. Because I am not in any system they can access, she replied. That is the advantage of being officially dead. You move through the world in a way that certain people cannot anticipate. Reyes had come up beside Walker and was listening openly. He had stopped pretending he wasn't part of this conversation sometime in the first hour. Walker hadn't told him to step back because Reyes was his second, and because if Walker took a bullet in the next 90 minutes, Reyes needed to know everything. The people who set up tonight, Reyes said, leaning toward the handset. How high up does it go? A beat of silence. High enough that I spent 6 years deciding whether to go public with what I know, Ghost 7 said, or whether going public would just get me killed again before the information reached anyone who could do something with it. Reyes looked at Walker. Walker looked back. And now? Walker asked. Now I have 20 witnesses, she said, simply, flatly. And one of them is a decorated captain with 11 years of service and a record that is considerably harder to discredit than a soldier who is officially listed as killed in action. Another pause. Move your unit, Captain. We talk while we walk. They moved. Webb helped support Okafor on one side, a soldier named Torres on the other. Chen walked behind them, watching Okafor's breathing, with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what the margins were and was not going to let them slip. The rest of the unit filed out of the shelter in pairs, quiet and disciplined, each man carrying the weight of what the last 6 hours had meant without putting it into words, because there were no words that fit yet, and there probably wouldn't be for a long time. Walker walked at the front with the handset and Ghost 7 in his ear. "Tell me about Silent Horizon," he said. The response took a moment, like drawing something up from a depth. "8 of us," she said. "Special reconnaissance. We were sent into the northern mountain corridor, the same general area your unit was operating in, to assess insurgent communication infrastructure. That was the official mission. And the real mission? We didn't know there was a real mission at the time. That's the thing about being used. You rarely know you're being used until it's too late to matter." Her voice carried no self-pity, just the plain observation of someone who had processed a thing so many times it had lost its jagged edges. "We went in clean, we did our job, and 4 days in we found something." Walker waited. "Financial records," she said, "on a hard drive hidden inside a structure that was supposed to be a civilian storage facility. The records showed money, moving large amounts, American-sourced, moving through a series of intermediary accounts into operational funds that were supporting the very insurgent network we had been sent to assess." Walker's jaw tightened. He kept walking, kept his eyes on the path. "Someone was funding them," he said. "Someone was funding them, yes. But more than that, someone was feeding them intelligence. Movement reports, patrol schedules, extraction point locations." She paused. "The same kind of information that would tell a well-organized enemy force exactly where to find a 20-man reconnaissance unit that had just discovered something they were not supposed to find." The parallels were not subtle. Walker felt them land in sequence, one after another, like each one was a weight being placed on a scale that had already been loaded past comfortable. "You reported it," he said. "Our team leader reported it. Captain David Mercer, best officer I ever served under. He reported it through the secure uplink at 1,900 hours on the 4th day. A brief silence. "By 200 the next morning, our position was compromised. They hit us from 3 directions. It was not an opportunistic attack. It was a coordinated elimination." Reyes, walking just behind Walker, said quietly, "They used the uplink." "The uplink confirmed our location and gave them a time window," Ghost 7 said. She had heard him. Of course she had heard him. "Yes. The moment Mercer transmitted that report, we were marked. The attack came fast enough that they had to have been pre-positioned. Someone gave the order before the report was even fully processed." Her voice stayed steady. Walker was beginning to understand that the steadiness was not composure in the ordinary sense. It was something that had been built out of necessity, brick by brick, over 6 years of mornings when she had woken up alone in the mountains and made the decision to keep going. 7 of my team died. Mercer died, our communications specialist. Our 2 snipers, 3 others. I was the only one who made it out, and I made it out because I was on an elevated position when the attack started, and I had enough cover to move without being seen. "They thought you were dead," Walker said. "They had every reason to think so. I didn't transmit. I didn't move toward any extraction point. I went up instead of down, which is not what a wounded soldier trying to survive is supposed to do, which is exactly why it worked." She paused, "And then I stayed. For 6 years," Walker said. "For 6 years. Torres, up ahead, shifted Okafor's weight and said something quiet. And Okafor responded with something short and rough and almost like a laugh, and the sound of it, brief and improbable and deeply human, moved through the column like a small warm thing in the cold dark." Walker spoke carefully. "While you were staying. What were you doing?" "Learning," she said. "Watching. The same corridor, the same mountain networks, the same movement of people and information. You learn a great deal in 6 years of observation when you have no other agenda. When you are not looking for what you were sent to look for, you see what is actually there." A pause. "I rebuilt the picture from the outside. I found the links, names, accounts, operational patterns. I have documentation that makes what your unit found look like a footnote." Reyes moved up beside Walker and spoke quietly, not into the handset but to Walker directly. "She's been building a case." Walker looked at him. "For 6 years. For the families," Ghost 7 said, and the 2 words landed differently than everything before them. Not flat, not steady. Something slightly different. The way a door opens a fraction and you see a different quality of light on the other side before it closes again. "The 7 people who died with me, they have families. Parents, siblings, some of them had children. The official report says they died in combat. It gives them a story that is not the truth. A pause. Lies don't honor the dead. They protect the people who caused the death. And those people have been protected long enough. Nobody said anything for 30 seconds. They walked. The path climbed slightly and then leveled and then curved around a rock face that blocked the wind. And for a moment, the silence was full rather than empty, the kind that fills with what cannot be said. Because what cannot be said is too large for words right now, but is completely understood by everyone present. Then Private Webb, walking just behind Reyes and clearly tracking every word, spoke up young and tired and with the unfiltered directness of someone who had not yet learned to keep his most important questions behind his teeth. Ma'am, how are you still? How did you do it? 6 years alone up here. How does a person do that? The question sat in the air for a moment. Walker glanced back at Webb, half expecting Ghost 7 to redirect or deflect. She did not. One day at a time, she said. The same way anyone does anything that seems impossible from the outside. You don't look at the full 6 years. You look at today. Can I make it through today? Yes, do that again tomorrow. Keep doing that until one day you look back and the thing that seemed impossible is just your life. A beat, and you stay angry. Anger is useful. Keeps you warm when nothing else will. Webb thought about that. Then what were you angry at? The waste, she said. 7 good people wasted to protect bad ones. That is the kind of thing that can sustain you indefinitely. Private, if you let it. Then the handset crackled with sudden urgency, a different quality in her voice. The first time all night the control had shifted even slightly towards something faster. Stop, everybody stop right now. The column froze. Complete stillness. Not a foot moved, not a rifle shifted. Walker's hand went to his own, purely on reflex. What is it? He said quietly. Movement, 40 meters ahead. 2 individuals, moving laterally across your path. They are not moving toward you. They do not know you are here. But they will cross your path in approximately 60 seconds. Do not move. Do not transmit anything until I tell you. 60 seconds was a very long time to stand completely still in the dark, with a wounded man being held up between 2 soldiers and 20 sets of lungs trying to breathe as quietly as possible. Walker counted. 40 seconds. He could hear faintly the crunch of movement somewhere ahead in the dark. Footsteps on frozen ground, 2 sets. Moving with the unhurried confidence of people who believed they were alone. 50 seconds. The footsteps grew slightly louder, then held, then very gradually began to fade. At 68 seconds, he knew because he counted every single one. Ghost 7's voice returned. Their clear move. Quickly now they have a rotation, and the next pair comes through in 12 minutes. You need to be past this section before then. How do you know they have a rotation? Reyes asked, moving forward. Because I set up observation on this corridor 4 years ago, she said. I know their patterns better than they do. Move. They moved quickly. Okafor made a sound that he tried to suppress and didn't quite, and Chen said something short and steady to him, and Okafor nodded and kept his feet moving. And Walker watched it happen and filed it somewhere that he would think about later, in some quieter place, when there was space. Think about what a person could do when the alternative was not doing it. 11 minutes later, they were past the section. Ghost 7 said good. Just that, one word. But the way she said it, Walker had heard commanding officers deliver full speeches with less meaning in them than that single word from her. They kept moving, and then she said, Captain Walker, the documentation your unit found, the hard drive. Where is it now? Walker's pace didn't break, still at the cache site. Command told us to leave it in place. Of course they did, she said. And there it was again, not quite bitterness, not quite irony. Something that had been both of those things and had been processed into something quieter and more permanent. They needed it to remain in a location they controlled. If it disappeared with your unit, they couldn't manage what happened to it. Can we go back for it? No. You do not go back for anything tonight. But it does not matter. A pause. What is on your unit's cameras and recorders from that cache site matters more. Your men photographed the contents? Walker thought. Webb documented everything before we moved on. Webb. She seemed to locate the name in the conversation, attach it to the young private she had just spoken to. Private Webb, your communications specialist. He has the documentation on his personal recorder. Standard field documentation protocol, yes. Then the hard drive can stay where it is, she said. What Webb carries is sufficient. Webb, who had been listening, looked at the recording device attached to his vest with an entirely new understanding of what it represented and what that made him tonight. His hand moved to it involuntarily, confirming it was there, confirming it was still running. Keep that device safe, Ghost 7 said. More than anything else on this mountain tonight, protect that device. Yes, ma'am, Webb said, and his voice had changed. He sounded older than he had at the start of the conversation. Older in the way that people get older in a single night sometimes, when a night decides to carry years of weight. They walked for another 20 minutes and then 07 said, left, 30 meters. There is an alcove in the cliff face. Wait there. Wait for what? For my arrangements to arrive. They found the alcove. Deeper than the shelter had been almost a small cave, the kind that the mountain had made accidentally over centuries. Enough room, just enough. They filed in. Walker pressed the handset close. Go 7. You said arrangements that cost favors. I need to know what's coming. A man named Farhan Yusuf, she said. He is a civilian logistics contractor who has operated in this region for 19 years. He knows these mountains the way you know your childhood neighborhood. He is not military. He is not affiliated with any government. He moves supplies, people, information, and he owes me a debt that he has never had the opportunity to repay. A civilian, Ray said, his tone careful. A civilian who has helped more American soldiers off this mountain than your official extraction protocols have, Go 7 replied. And there was something in her voice that was not quite sharp, but was close to it. If you would prefer to wait for official extraction, I would remind you that official extraction tonight leads to Extraction Point Sierra. Reyes said nothing more. Farhan will bring 2 vehicles, she continued. He will take your wounded to a location where a medical team is waiting that is also part of the arrangement. The rest of you will have a choice about next steps, but your wounded will have what they need. That part is not negotiable. That part happens. And Farhan, Walker said, he knows why you're asking? He knows what tonight is? Farhan has known what tonight is for years, she said. He was not there for Silent Horizon, but he found me afterward. He is one of 3 people in the world who know I am alive. A brief pause. He will not ask questions. He will do what needs to be done. They waited. Walker sat with his back against the stone and the handset in both hands and found himself doing something he had not done in a very long time, which was simply sitting still and letting his mind do what it wanted. What it wanted, apparently, was to go back over the sequence of the night, the trap, the frequency, the voice, the path through the mountains, the things she had known that she could not possibly have known, and look at it from a different angle. Go 7, he said quietly. Yes. Why tonight? You've been out here 6 years. You have been watching and collecting and building the case. Why use the frequency tonight? Why answer? The pause was long, the longest of the night, long enough that he started to wonder if the channel had dropped, if he was listening to empty static, if the question was one she simply would not answer. Then, because tonight was the same as 6 years ago, he waited, the same pattern, the same leak, the same kind of trap in the same kind of location with the same logic behind it. I have watched these people operate for 6 years, and I know their signatures, Captain. And when I saw your unit's movement being mirrored by a responding force in a way that matched Silent Horizon almost exactly, she stopped. Started again. I could not watch it happen again. I could not sit on that ridgeline with evidence of what they were doing and watch 20 more people disappear while I waited for a better moment. There may not be a better moment, Walker said. No, she agreed. There may not. Which is why tonight is tonight. The weight of it settled over the alcove, like something physical. Then, from somewhere in the darkness outside, a sound. An engine, low, careful, moving slowly. The kind of vehicle driven by someone who knew every stone of the road. Walker was on his feet. That's Farhan, Go 7 said. Go 7, go, Captain. Your wounded man needs surgery. Go, and you another silence. I'll be here, she said. Walker held the handset for one more second. 20 men who were alive because of a woman on a ghost frequency. 20 men who had a real name for the first time tonight, the name she hadn't given yet, but that Walker already felt he almost knew. The way you feel a shape in the dark before you can see it clear. We're not leaving you behind, he said. The reply was quiet, and he would carry the sound of it for a long time. Captain, she said, I never left. I've been here the whole time. Now go take care of your people. He went. They moved out of the alcove and toward the sound of the engine, and Farhan Yusuf turned out to be a compact, weathered man in his 50s with careful eyes and hands that moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this particular kind of thing before and expected to do it again. He did not ask questions. He looked at Okafor and said 2 words to Chen, precise medical words, words that told Walker this man had seen this kind of wound before and knew what it needed. And Chen looked surprised and then not surprised and nodded. They loaded Okafor into the first vehicle. Chen went with him. Torres went with them. The second vehicle held the rest in 2 trips, Farhan driving the first himself. As Walker climbed in, he looked back at the mountains, at the dark ridgelines, at the places where a person could stand in the cold and watch an entire valley floor without being seen. He looked for a long time. He saw nothing. But he felt her up there the same way he had felt her all night, the way you feel a wall at your back in the dark. Solid, real, present. In the vehicle, Ray sat beside him and said nothing for a long time. Then Walker, yeah, the documentation, Webb's recorder, the case she's been building. Reyes kept his voice low, his eyes forward. If we get back and the wrong people, debrief us first. Webb goes nowhere near a formal debrief without legal representation, Walker said. And neither do we. We don't report in through standard channels. We go directly to someone outside this command structure. Who? Walker thought about it. Not for long. The answer had been assembling itself in the back of his mind throughout the entire drive down the mountain. Army Inspector General and a JAG officer I trust. And he paused.
Rachel Morgan. Reyes turned to look at him.
Captain Rachel Morgan, Army Intelligence, stationed at Bagram. Someone Walker had known for 4 years. Someone whose fundamental honesty he had tested in smaller ways before tonight without knowing he was doing it. Someone who had every clearance necessary to take documentation to the right people and the specific kind of integrity that made certain people very uncomfortable. You sure about Morgan? No, Walker said honestly. But Ghost 7 has been sure about nothing for 6 years, and she still held on. I can manage one leap of faith. Reyes thought about that. Then he leaned back in his seat and exhaled slowly and said, okay, Morgan it is. Outside, the mountains moved past them in the dark, immense and indifferent, holding their secrets the way they had always held them patiently, permanently, with no particular interest in whether the people moving through them survived or disappeared. But somewhere up there, Walker knew, a woman who was officially dead was still watching, still moving, still doing the things she had been doing for 6 years in the cold, the silence and the absolute solitude of a mission that no one had given her and that she had given herself. He pulled out the radio one more time. Press transmit on the ghost frequency one more time. Ghost 7, we're clear of the mountain, static. He waited. Then faint, almost too faint a signal, good. Her voice barely there, like something carried on the wind from a very long distance. Take care of your men, Captain Walker. We're going to finish this, he said. Whatever you've built up there, we're going to make it count. The signal faded. Then at the very edge of audible, one last transmission, I know. And then the frequency went quiet again, and the mountains fell behind them. And Walker held the silent radio in both hands and thought about 7 soldiers whose names the world had been allowed to forget, and 20 soldiers who were alive because one woman had refused to let forgetting be the end of the story. The vehicle drove on, and on a mountain with no public name, in the dark before dawn, the ghost sniper settled back into her watch and let the silence close around her like something familiar, something she had made her peace with a long time ago and had never quite managed to make her peace with at all. Both things were true. She had learned to live with both things being true. Farhan drove like a man who had memorized every rut and curve by feel rather than by sight, which Walker suspected was exactly the case. The vehicle moved fast but controlled, taking turns that weren't on any map Walker had ever seen, cutting through terrain that should have been impassable and wasn't, the headlights off for long stretches because Farhan apparently did not need them. Nobody spoke much in the first 20 minutes. The kind of silence that follows surviving something, not peaceful silence, but the silence of people who are still internally running the numbers, still tallying what just happened against what almost happened, still adjusting to the fact that the gap between those two things had been narrower than any of them wanted to think about directly. Torres was asleep before they hit the first switchback, his head against the window, his rifle across his knees, out completely. Webb was not asleep. Webb was holding his recording device against his chest with both hands and looking at nothing in particular, which Walker recognized as the look of someone whose mind was somewhere else entirely, back on the mountain, probably, back in that shelter, back listening to a voice that had no business being on any frequency explaining, in the most even tone imaginable, how she had watched 7 people die and then decided to stay. Reyes caught Walker's eye in the dark of the vehicle and gestured very slightly with his chin toward Webb. Walker nodded. He had seen it too. Webb, he said, keeping his voice quiet enough not to wake Torres. Webb looked at him. You did good tonight. Everything you did, the documentation, the communication work, holding the pack together when anyone else might have dropped it. You did well. Webb opened his mouth, closed it then. Sir, the people who set this up, The people who sent us out there knowing what was going to happen. He stopped, swallowed, tried again. Are they going to? Are they going to be allowed to? No, Walker said, flat and complete. No hedging. Not tonight. Webb looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, held the recorder tighter. It was 521 when Farhan pulled the first vehicle to a stop. A building, low, functional, nothing distinguishing about it from the outside. But inside, Walker could see light under the door. And when Farhan knocked twice and the door opened, the smell that came out was unmistakably medical. Antiseptic, clean equipment. The particular chemical clarity of a space set up for surgical work. Two people inside, a man and a woman, both in their 40s, both with the calm, focused energy of people who had been doing this for a long time and had made peace with doing it in unconventional settings. The woman moved directly to Chen and started asking questions in rapid, precise English. Chen answered just as rapidly. They were in a professional dialogue before the rest of the group had fully processed what they were looking at. Okafor was moved inside. Walker watched them take him through an inner door and felt something loosen in his chest that had been locked tight since moment Okafor had taken the hit, some internal mechanism he hadn't consciously known he was holding. Farhan reappeared at his shoulder. He will be taken care of, he said. His English was careful and precise. These are good. They have done this before. For her, Walker asked. For Ghost 7, Farhan looked at him for a moment, not evaluating, more like remembering. For the people she sends to them, yes. There have been others over the years. Not many. Paused. She saves the ones she can reach. Walker thought about that. About what that meant that across 6 years, there had been other moments, other nights, other soldiers or civilians or people caught in the machinery of something larger than themselves who had been quietly steered to safety by a voice on a frequency nobody was supposed to know existed. A quiet, invisible thread of survival woven through the official record of events that never mentioned her at all. Farhan, Walker said. How did she find you after Silent Horizon? Farhan was quiet for a moment. Then she did not find me. I found her. He looked at the mountains behind them, visible now in the very first gray suggestion of dawn at the eastern edge of the sky. I found a woman on a ridgeline who looked like she had been through something that should have killed her. I gave her food, water. I did not ask what happened. In this part of the world, Captain, you learn very quickly that asking what happened to a wounded soldier is a good way to become a problem for someone. He paused. After 3 weeks, she told me some of it, enough. I understood enough, and I told her I would help however I could, whenever she asked. And she never left, Walker said. She could not leave, Farhan said. Not with judgment, just fact. Not with what she knew. Not with what she was building. She is the most patient person I have ever met, Captain. And patience in these mountains is what keeps you alive long after everything else has run out. Walker's phone buzzed. He looked at it and stopped breathing for half a second. It was a secure message from an internal Army communication channel. Standard format. Official. Sender ID. Colonel Bryce Haddon, Forward Operations Command. The message read, Raven Actual, confirm status and current location immediately. Your unit has been classified as missing. Extraction teams are being deployed to Point Sierra. Confirm receipt. Walker stared at it. Reyes leaned over and read it over his shoulder and said something very quiet and very profane. They don't know we got out, Reyes said. They know we're not at Sierra, Walker said, which means they know the trap didn't close. Which means they're looking for us, Reyes finished. And now they're going to try to look like the rescue. Walker looked at the message for another 3 seconds. Then he turned to Webb. Webb, if I respond to this message from my phone on this channel, how quickly can command triangulate our location? Webb did not hesitate. He had been thinking about this for the last 20 miles. Seconds, sir. The moment you transmit any signal on any channel they're monitoring, they have us. Can you block it? Webb looked at his kit, back at Walker. I can route a response through a delayed relay. It'll look like we're transmitting from a location about 40 kilometers from here. Buys us maybe 2 hours before the triangulation catches up. Do it, Walker said. And the response says, Raven Actual, all personnel accounted for, en route to secondary rally point, requesting secure debrief with Inspector General Representative and JAG officer upon arrival. Do not send extraction to Sierra. Repeat, do not send extraction to Sierra. Webb looked up sharply. Sir, sending that message tells command exactly what we know. Yes, Walker said. Reyes said slowly. That's intentional. If the people who set this up think we don't know anything, they'll assume we came out of the mountains confused and we're making our way back through normal channels. They'll let us come in, and they'll control the debrief, and they'll control the narrative. Walker looked at both of them. But if they know we know, if they understand that we're asking for IG and JAG specifically, that we're explicitly telling them not to send a team to Sierra, then the calculation changes. Now discrediting us becomes harder. Now we're already on record requesting oversight channels. Reyes thought about it. Or it accelerates whatever they're planning. Maybe, Walker said. But 20 witnesses, one very credible recording, and a paper trail that now includes an official request for oversight, that's a different problem to manage than 20 soldiers who walked off a mountain and don't know why. We're harder to disappear quietly now than we are if we stay quiet. He said the last sentence and felt the full weight of the word disappear. And so did everyone else in the vehicle, because the word did not mean an abstraction tonight. Tonight it meant exactly what Ghost 7 had described. It meant 7 people in a mountain corridor. It meant an official report that said one thing and the truth that said something completely different. It meant a woman spending 6 years on a ridgeline because she understood that disappearing quietly was what they were counting on. Webb sent the message through the relay. Then he looked at Walker and said, "Sir, the recording on my device, what exactly do we do with it?" Walker opened his mouth to answer, and then his radio, the ghost frequency, still open, still on crackle. Every person in the vehicle went still. The voice, when it came, was faint. Signal degraded by distance now, the mountains between them doing what mountains do. But it was her, Captain Walker. "Are you receiving?" Walker grabbed the handset. "Receiving? Go ahead. I've been listening to your command channel." A pause. "I have a broader antenna range than your standard kit. I heard Haddon's message." "Colonel Bryce Haddon," Walker said. "Is that the name?" "That is one of the names," she said. "Haddon is the operational layer. He coordinates. He does not originate." Her signal flickered slightly. "The originating authority is higher. I have documentation for both." "Who is above Haddon?" Walker asked. The signal crackled, and for a moment he thought he had lost her. Then it cleared just enough. "General Marcus Holt," she said. The name dropped into the vehicle like a stone into still water. Walker heard Reyes exhale beside him, heard Webb make a sound that was not quite a word. General Marcus Holt, not a colonel, not a mid-level operative running a private agenda inside a command structure. A general, 2 stars, decorated, known. A man whose face appeared in official photographs and whose name appeared in public statements and whose career represented everything the institutional army was supposed to stand for. "Holt," Walker said. His voice was very controlled. "Marcus Holt is behind this." "Marcus Holt has been behind this for 9 years, Ghost 7 said. "The financial network your unit found, the insurgent communication infrastructure that was supposedly being funded by external sources, Holt's fingerprints, are on the originating accounts. I have the documentation. I have the full chain. 6 years of it." A pause. "He was already operating when Silent Horizon happened. My team getting too close to the financial records is what triggered the order. He has been running this for 9 years, and he has protected it every time it came close to being seen." Reyes leaned across Walker toward the handset. "Ghost 7, a 2-star general. Do you understand what you're asking us to take on?" "The institutional resistance alone." "Lieutenant Reyes." Her voice was steady but direct. "I understand exactly what I am asking you to take on. I have understood it for 6 years. I have built the case specifically because I understood that the target was high enough that anything less than airtight documentation would be dismissed, buried, or turned around on the people who brought it." A brief pause. "I am not asking you to accuse a general on a feeling. I am asking you to carry evidence that makes the accusation unavoidable." Reyes sat back, said nothing. Walker looked at the gray light growing at the edge of the sky and made the kind of calculation that at his 11 years had trained him for, not the battlefield kind, not the tactical kind, but the deeper, the one that asked, what does this cost? What does it mean? And is this the right thing to do? The answer to the last question had been clear since the moment he pressed transmit on a forbidden frequency and heard a voice that was supposed to be dead tell him that his extraction point was a trap. "Ghost 7, he said. "The documentation you have, 6 years of it. How does it reach us?" A pause. "Farhan." Walker looked at Farhan, who was leaning against the outside of the vehicle and had been listening without expression. Farhan nodded once, like this was something he had been ready for. Like this was the moment toward which the last 6 years had been, quietly and without announcement, building. "Farhan has physical copies," Ghost 7 said. "Encrypted drive. He has been holding them for 2 years waiting. He knows the decryption sequence. You will also need a secondary code that I will give you only when you have a secure line to someone outside Holt's reporting chain. Rachel Morgan Walker said. Army Intelligence Bagram. A silence. Long enough to make him aware of it. Then I know Rachel Morgan. He had not expected that. You know her. I knew her before Silent Horizon. We served overlapping deployments in 2017. She was doing intelligence work in the Eastern Corridor when my unit was operating there. The signal faded slightly, then returned. She had a reputation for following the evidence wherever it went, regardless of where it pointed. That is a rare quality, and it was notable enough that I remember it. A pause? I don't know who she is now. 6 years changes people. She's still the same, Walker said with more certainty than he had expressed about anything in the last 12 hours. Then get to her, Go 7 said. Get to her before Haddon figures out you're not coming in through normal channels. You have a window, Captain. It is not a large window. How large? Haddon will realize within the hour that the debrief request through IG channels was deliberate. When that happens, he will contact Holt. When Holt understands that your unit survived and is asking for independent oversight, he will begin damage control. He is very fast at damage control. He has had 9 years of practice. The signal crackled again. You have until approximately 700 before this becomes significantly harder. Walker looked at his watch. 539.81 minutes. Farhan, Walker said. Farhan was already moving, already opening the back of the vehicle, already reaching for something that had been stored in a locked compartment that Walker had not looked at before, because they had had other priorities before. He brought out a hard-sided case, set it on the vehicle's running board, looked at Walker with those careful, quiet eyes. 2 drives, Farhan said. Everything she has built, every name, every account, every operational record. Everything that proves what happened to her team and what has been happening since. He put his hand on the case for a moment, just a moment. Like a small farewell gesture towards something that had lived in his keeping for a long time and was now moving on to wherever it needed to go. She asked me to hold it until the right person asked for it. I was beginning to wonder if that person would come. She knew someone would come, Walker said. Farhan looked at him. No, he said gently. She hoped someone would come. There is a difference. And she knew the difference better than anyone. Walker took the case, held it, thought about the weight of it, not the physical weight, which was manageable, but the other kind. The weight of 6 years of patience and grief and cold mornings and deliberate invisible living and 7 names carried internally like a private obligation to the dead. He thought about all of that, and then he put it in the vehicle and said, let's move. Reyes was already on his phone, composing a message. Walker glanced over and saw the recipient, Morgan R. Captain. The message was brief and entirely in a language that looked like nothing, a series of references and shorthand that would mean nothing to anyone who hadn't served with both Walker and Morgan in the same unit 3 years ago, which Walker had carefully maintained as a private cipher for exactly the kind of situation where standard communication channels could not be trusted. Morgan would understand it if she was still Morgan. Reyes sent it. They both looked at the phone. 20 seconds. 40. Walker felt the time the way he had felt it in the trench in pieces, each one its own small eternity, the math running underneath everything else. Then the phone buzzed. Morgan's reply was 4 words. Tell me where, now. Reyes looked at Walker, and the look on his face was the closest thing to relief that Walker had seen from him all night, which wasn't much, because Reyes did not do relief easily, but it was real. She's in, Reyes said. She was always in, Walker said. She just didn't know it yet. He picked up the ghost frequency handset one more time. The signal was weaker now, more distance, more mountains between them. But she was still there. He could feel it in the static the same way he had felt it all night. Ghost 7, Morgan responded. She's secure and she's ready. A longer pause than usual. Long enough that he adjusted his grip on the handset, concerned about signal loss. Then good. And something in that word, something underneath the steadiness. Something that had been below the surface of every transmission all night surfaced for just a moment. Not much, just enough. That's good, Captain. We're moving to her position now. We have the drives. We're going to finish this. Static then, Captain Walker. Yes.
When you get to Morgan.
When you sit down with her and you open those drives and you start going through what is there. She stopped, started again. The names of my team: David Mercer, Andre Baptiste, James Fong, Lucia Ramirez, Thomas Webb. Not a signal pause, a different kind. And Private First Class Kevin Cole, 22 years old. It was his second deployment. She stopped again. They are in the documentation. They are listed as collateral casualties of an insurgent attack. I want their names to be what the documentation is actually about. Not Holt, not the money, not the network. Those things matter for the investigation. But the 7 of them, that is what it is actually about. Walker could not speak for a moment. 7 names, 6 years. The thing that had sustained her, the anger at the waste, she had told Webb, the anger at good people sacrificed for bad ones, was not really anger at all. Or not only anger. It was something older and more permanent than anger. It was the refusal to let people be erased. The absolute refusal, even at the cost of 6 years of frozen solitude and officially not existing, to allow the record to stand uncorrected. I will make sure, Walker said. His voice was not entirely steady, and he did not try to make it entirely steady. I give you my word. Those 7 names are the center of it. The signal crackled. Then barely audible through the static and the distance, thank you. And then the frequency went quiet in a way that felt different from the other silences of the night. Not empty, full, complete, in the way that a sentence is complete when it has said exactly what it needed to say and does not need anything added to it. Walker held the quiet handset for a moment. Then Reyes touched his arm. Walker, we need to move, clock is running. Yeah, he set the handset down, picked up the case. Yeah, let's go. They left Farhan at the building with a handshake that was inadequate for what the man had done, which Farhan acknowledged with a very small nod that said he understood, and it was fine, and this was exactly what it was supposed to be, and nothing more was necessary. They took the second vehicle. Reyes drove because Reyes was the best driver in any unit he had ever been part of, which was a fact he never mentioned and never had to because everyone around him simply knew it. Torres had woken up and was in the back with Webb and 2 other soldiers, and the vehicle moved fast and deliberate through the growing gray light of early morning. They had 72 minutes. Walker sat in the front seat and thought about the 7 names. Sarah Kowalski, Andre Baptiste, James Fong, Thomas Webb, Kevin Cole. He said them in his head. Committed them the way he had committed other things. Over 11 years not written down, not recorded, but seated somewhere permanent, below the level of the retrievable and above the level of the forgettable. Not a message, a call. The caller ID read Haddon B. Heel the vehicle went very quiet. Reyes glanced at the screen and back at the road and said nothing. Walker looked at the phone, at the name on it, at the fact that Haddon was calling a personal device number that was supposed to be secure, which told Walker that either the security of that line had been compromised or Haddon was reaching through channels he was not supposed to have access to, which was its own kind of answer about how deep this went and how certain Haddon was of his own position within it. Don't answer, Reyes said quietly. I know. Walker watched the phone ring. 3 more times, then it stopped. 8 seconds later, it rang again. And Walker, who had made several very good decisions, and 1 or 2 questionable ones in the last 8 hours, made a decision that Reyes would later describe as either extremely smart or completely insane, depending on the day you asked him about it. He answered Captain Walker. He kept his voice neutral. Professional. The voice of a soldier who had just had a very difficult night and was following proper protocol and had no particular concerns to speak of. Captain Haddon's voice was measured, controlled. The voice of a man who had practice at measured and controlled. I'm glad you're safe. Your unit status had us extremely concerned. What's your current position? We're mobile, sir. En route to debrief. Your message indicated a request for IG and JAG representation. That's unusual, Captain, given the circumstances. Can you help me understand what's driving that request? Walker heard it, the probe, the careful, professional probe. Not demanding, not aggressive. Asking in the way that people ask when they are actually telling you they are watching very carefully for your answer. Standard protocol, sir, Walker said. After an operation with this level of complexity and this many unanswered questions about what went wrong, I want to make sure the debrief process is properly overseen. For my unit's protection. A pause. Shorter than it should have been from a man with nothing to hide. Course. That's entirely reasonable. We want to make sure your unit is properly supported. Can you give me a location so I can ensure appropriate resources are directed to you? There it was. The location request dressed in the language of support. Reyes was watching the road and his jaw was tight. Webb in the back had his hand on his recorder again. A reflex the way you check for a weapon. We're mobile, sir, Walker said again. I'll have precise location details available at debrief. ETA approximately 90 minutes to the rally point. Another pause. Which rally point, Captain? The one designated by IG protocol, sir. I believe you'll be notified through appropriate channels. A beat. Thank you for calling, Colonel. Raven actual out. He ended the call before Haddon could respond. The vehicle was very quiet. Then Torres from the back seat said, "Sir, did you just tell a colonel to go through appropriate channels?" "I did," Walker said. "While we are currently operating outside appropriate channels." "Also correct." Torres was quiet for a moment. "Then that's either the bravest thing I've ever seen or—" "Don't finish that sentence," Reyes said. Sir Walker's phone buzzed again. Not a call this time. A message from an unknown number, not military format, not official channel, just a standard message app text with no name attached. He opened it. 3 words, "He's calling Holt." Walker stared at it. Reyes glanced over. "Read it." "Who sent that?" Walker looked at the number. No contact attached. New, but the message itself, the 3 words, the timing, the fact that it had arrived within 90 seconds of him ending the call with Haddon told him exactly one thing. Somewhere someone was monitoring Haddon's communications. Someone who was not part of Haddon's network. Someone who wanted Walker to know. "Go 7, he said quietly. Not into the handset, the signal was too degraded at this distance. Just to himself. To the vehicle. To the understanding that she had not simply been watching from a ridgeline tonight. She had been running a parallel operation for 6 years, and what she had built was not just a case file but a network of observation that reached further than any of them had understood. He typed back, "Understood. How long do we have?" The reply came in 20 seconds. "Holt makes 1 call after Haddon. That call takes 5 minutes. After that, your window closes. Drive faster." Reyes had apparently been reading over his shoulder again, because without a word he pressed the accelerator harder. Webb leaned forward from the back. "Sir, what happens when Holt's call goes out? What does that mean practically?" "It means he starts activating the people he controls who are between us and Morgan," Walker said. "Checkpoints, diversions, reasons to slow us down or redirect us." He looked at the road ahead. "It means the next 45 minutes determine everything." Torres said quietly. Nobody laughed, but almost. And Walker thought, in the smallest part of his mind that was still capable of noticing something other than the immediate problem, that the almost was important. That the almost was what kept people functional when the math was bad and the clock was running. And somewhere a general who had been protected by official silence for 9 years was picking up a phone to make a call that was designed to make 20. Soldiers disappear as quietly and completely as 7 soldiers had disappeared 6 years before. 7 names. He carried them like a compass heading. Sarah Kowalski, Andre Baptiste, James Fong, Thomas Webb, Kevin Cole. He drove toward Morgan. He drove toward the window before it closed. He drove toward the thing that Ghost 7 had spent 6 years in the cold and the silence building toward, not for herself, not for recognition, not because anyone had ordered her to, or because she expected anything on the other side of it, but because the record was wrong, and wrong records were something that certain people could not tolerate. And Olivia Hayes, whether or not the world still held that name in any living document, was one of those people. The mountains fell further behind them with every mile. And in those mountains, in the cold that was finally beginning to soften at its very edges with the suggestion of a sun that had not yet risen, the woman who had spent 6 years making herself invisible did what she had always done when the people she was watching over moved out of her range. She watched until she couldn't see them anymore. And then she watched the direction they had gone. And she kept watching. They made it to Morgan at 641, 19 minutes inside the window. Captain Rachel Morgan was waiting outside a low administrative building on the eastern edge of the Bagram compound, and the first thing Walker noticed about her was that she was alone. No aide, no escort, no official contingent of any kind. Just Morgan, in her uniform, with a coffee cup in one hand and a look on her face that said she had been awake since Reyes's coded message arrived, and had spent the intervening time doing exactly what Walker knew she would do, which was thinking very fast and very carefully about what the message meant and what it required of her. She was 36 years old, dark hair pulled back, eyes that missed very little and communicated even less than they missed. Walker had known her for 4 years and trusted her for 3.5 of those. The first 6 months had been the period he was deciding whether to trust her, which was standard for him, which Morgan had apparently understood, because she had never once pushed for more access or more information than he had offered. She had simply been consistently, reliably herself, which was the most trust-building thing a person could do and also the rarest. She looked at the vehicle pulling up, looked at Walker getting out, looked at the case in his hands and the handset on his belt and the particular quality of exhaustion on his face That was not the exhaustion of a hard night, but the exhaustion of a hard night that had also rearranged several fundamental assumptions about the world. Walker, she said, Morgan, you look terrible. I've had a complicated evening, I gathered. She looked at the case. Is that what I think it is? Depends on what you think it is. Evidence that is going to make several very powerful people extremely uncomfortable. Then yes, Walker said, that is exactly what it is. She nodded once, crisp, professional. Then she looked at the rest of the unit filing out of the vehicle, Torres, Webb, the others, and something shifted in her expression. Not softness exactly. More like a recognition of the specific gravity of what she was looking at. 20 men who had walked off a mountain that was supposed to swallow them. 20 men who were not supposed to be standing in the early morning light looking back at her. Come inside, she said, all of you. Quickly, they moved inside. The room Morgan had secured was small and functionally bare. A table, chairs, a secure terminal in the corner that was already running. She had prepared, which meant she had understood more from Reyes's coded message than Walker had expected, which meant she was exactly who he had believed her to be. Walker set the case on the table. Morgan looked at it, then looked at him, she said. He talked. He gave it to her in the compressed, precise way that 11 years of operational debriefs had trained him: chronological, factual, minimum editorializing, maximum information per sentence. The mission, the ambush, the silence from command, the forbidden frequency, the voice, the guidance through the mountains, the truth about extraction point Sierra, the documentation cache, Webb's recorder, Farhan, and the names. General Marcus Holt, Colonel Bryce Hidden. Morgan listened without interrupting. She was very good at listening without interrupting. Her coffee sat untouched and went cold during the 22 minutes it took Walker to lay it all out, and she did not notice because her entire attention was somewhere else. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, Ghost 7. Yes, the frequency has been classified inactive for 6 years. Yes, and the call sign attached to it was removed from accessible databases.
Yes.
Morgan looked at the table for a moment. Then, when I was doing Eastern Corridor intelligence work in 2017, there was a reconnaissance team operating in the Northern Mountain Corridor. Their mission was classified above my access level. All I knew was the unit designation and that they went dark. She paused. The official report said they were killed in action. Enemy ambush, no survivors. She looked up at Walker, the lead sniper on that team. Her name was in the initial unit briefing I received before the access level cut me off. Major Olivia Hayes. The name landed in the room. Webb made a sound. Small, involuntary. Like the sound of a thing finally clicking into place that had been slightly misaligned for hours. She knows you, Walker said. She remembered you from 2017. Said you had a reputation for following evidence wherever it went. Morgan looked at him steadily. She's been alive this whole time. 6 years, Walker said, in the mountains. Building the case. Morgan absorbed that. The way she absorbed it without visible shock, without the dramatic recalibration that most people would have needed, told Walker everything he needed to know about whether he had been right to come to her. She processed it the way she processed everything, practically quickly, and in terms of what it required her to do next. The drive, she said. I need to verify the encryption before we open anything. If these have been in field conditions for any significant period, there's a chain of custody issue we need to address before any of this is actionable in a formal proceeding. How long does verification take? 20 minutes for the technical verification. The chain of custody documentation, she paused. That's going to require a formal statement from whoever held them. Farhan Yusuf, Walker said. He held them for 2 years. He'll provide a statement. He'll need to do it through proper legal channels. Ghost 7, Walker stopped. Old habit, using the call sign. He corrected himself deliberately because the name mattered. Major Hayes anticipated that. She said she'd provide the decryption sequence only when we had a secure line to someone outside Holt's reporting chain. You are outside Holt's reporting chain. Morgan looked at him carefully. You're asking me to open a direct communication line with a soldier who is officially listed as killed in action. A pause. Very brief.
Okay, Morgan said.
She moved to the secure terminal in the corner and began establishing a channel with the focused efficiency of someone who had been doing intelligence work for 12 years and understood exactly which protocol to use and which to avoid. Her hands moved fast, her eyes moved faster. Walker watched and thought about the window, about Holt making a call, about the 45 minutes that had become 30 that had become, at this point, approximately 12. Morgan, he said, timeline. We need to move faster than we're comfortable with. I'm aware, she said, without looking up from the terminal. Haddon called IG, requesting that your debrief be conducted through his office specifically. 40 minutes ago. IG is currently processing the request, which means we have. She glanced at a small window before this building becomes a place that the wrong people want access to. Reyes looked at Walker. How did she know about Haddon's request to IG? Because I monitor certain communication channels as part of my standard intelligence function, Morgan said calmly, still typing. And because when a decorated captain sends me a coded emergency message at 5 in the morning and I can't immediately explain why, I start paying very close attention to everything adjacent to his situation. Torres, who had been quiet throughout, said to no one in particular, I want to be her when I grow up. Morgan did not smile, but her shoulders moved very slightly in a way that suggested she had heard and was filing it under a category she would probably never acknowledge. Terminal chimed, secure channel established. Walker picked up the handset, the ghost frequency. He looked at it for a moment, the piece of equipment that had started all of this, that had connected him to a voice that should not have existed, that had guided 20 men through the dark towards something that might be the end of a 9-year silence. Ghost 7. This is Raven Actual. I have Captain Rachel Morgan. Secure line. We're ready for the decryption sequence. Static. Long enough that he felt it then, Walker. Her voice was cleaner on this transmission. She had moved closer to whatever relay point boosted the signal, or found higher ground, or done whatever she did when she needed better range. Morgan is on the line? Morgan leaned toward the handset. Major Hayes. This is Captain Rachel Morgan, Army Intelligence. I remember your unit from the 2017 Eastern Corridor briefing. I want you to know that everything Captain Walker has brought to me tonight will receive my full attention and the full weight of whatever authority I have. A silence, longer than the signal delay could account for. Walker could hear something in that silence that he had not heard before in the transmissions. Not grief exactly, not relief exactly. Something that was the specific emotion of a person who has been carrying something completely alone for a very long time and has just for the first time felt another set of hands reach for the weight. Morgan, Ghost 7, said finally. Her voice was the same controlled steady, but something underneath it was different. Just slightly, just enough, the first drive. The encryption key is 17 characters. I'll give them in 3 groups. She gave the key. Morgan typed it with exact precision. The drive opened. What came up on the terminal screen was not what Walker had expected, which was rows of financial data and operational records. What came up first was a photograph, a group photograph. 8 people in military gear, mountain backdrop, the informal ease of a team that knew each other well, squinting slightly into the sun. 7 of them were laughing at something outside the frame. One of them, a woman, standing at the right edge of the group, slightly apart, was not laughing. She was looking directly at the camera with the expression of someone who had not yet learned how to relax in photographs, or had never seen the point. Walker recognized the expression. He had heard it in her voice all night. Below the photograph, a text document, 1 page, 8 names with service numbers, ranks, and next of kin information. The header read, Operation Silent Horizon Personnel Record, Classified. And next to each name, in the official record column, where the status should have read, in formal military language, something definitive about the nature of their death. Next to 7 of the names, it read KIA, Enemy Contact, 14 November 2019. Next to the 8th name, Major Olivia Hayes, it read KA, Enemy Contact, 14 November 2019. Morgan looked at the screen, then at Walker, then at the handset. Major Hayes, she said quietly, for the record. What is your actual status as of today? A pause. Then with something that was almost dry humor in the deepest register of the word, alive. Contrary to official documentation, Morgan looked back at the screen. The record will be corrected, she said. It was not a platitude. It was a statement of intent, delivered the way Morgan delivered everything as something she had already decided and was simply informing you of. Then the terminal pinged with an incoming message. Morgan read it and her expression changed. Not dramatically. Morgan's expressions never changed dramatically. But Walker had been watching her face for 4 years, and he knew the specific micro-shift that meant something had just become significantly more complicated. What? He said. Halt, she said. He's not making calls. She looked up. He's coming here. The room recalibrated. Reyes straightened. Torres moved toward the door on reflex. Webb gripped the recorder. Here as in Walker started. Here as in this compound. He's already on a transport. ETA approximately 50 minutes. Morgan's voice was completely steady. Someone told him where you are. Nobody knew where we were going, except Walker stopped, thought. The unknown number that had texted him. He's calling Holt. 3 words from a source he had assumed was Ghost 7 monitoring Haddon's communications. But what if it wasn't monitoring? What if it was something else? What if the text had not been warning him, but rather establishing in the process of appearing to warn him exactly where his phone signal was operating from? Morgan, he said, my phone. The unknown number text. Can you trace the origin? She was already on it. 40 seconds of typing. Then she stopped. The text originated from a device registered to a logistics contractor attached to Forward Operations Command. She looked at him. Walker, the text was not from Hayes. Someone in Haddon's network sent it. Someone who knew your number and wanted to appear to be helping you while actually triangulating my position, Walker finished. Reyes said low and controlled, we led them here. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Walker made a decision the way he made all decisions when time had run out quickly, completely, without the luxury of doubt. How much of the first drive have you processed? He said to Morgan. Enough to establish evidentiary basis for a formal investigation. Not enough for a complete case. How long for complete processing? Both drives fully? 3 hours minimum. We don't have 3 hours. We have 50 minutes before Holt arrives. He looked at her. What can you do in 50 minutes? Morgan turned back to the terminal. Her hands were already moving. I can transmit everything currently processed to 3 separate secure repositories outside this command structure. D. Inspector General, Senate Armed Services Committee Secure Intake. And she paused, typed something. A federal prosecutor in Washington I have worked with before who has jurisdiction over military financial crimes. Do it, Walker said. I've already started, she said. While she worked, Walker looked at the group photograph still open in the corner of the screen. The 8 people. The mountain behind them. The 7 who were laughing at something outside the frame. He turned to the handset. Ghost 7, Holt is inbound to this location. 50 minutes. Morgan is transmitting the documentation to independent repositories. We need the second drive open now. Second drive, she said. The voice was immediate. Sharp. She had been listening. Of course she had been listening. The second drive is different from the first. The first drive is evidence. The second drive is a pause. It is more personal. What does that mean? It means it contains things that I recorded over 6 years that are not financial records or operational logs. Testimony, my own account. A complete record of everything I witnessed, everything I learned, everything I could attest to from personal observation. Her voice was very steady. It is the part that cannot be dismissed as circumstantial. Because a witness who was present, even a witness the system decided to declare dead, carries a different weight than documents alone. You recorded your own testimony, Walker said. Every detail I could remember. Everything I observed after. Dates, times, specific conversations I overheard through the communication monitoring I set up in the corridor. Names attached to specific actions. Actions attached to specific outcomes. It is the kind of testimony that a prosecutor finds useful. Morgan had stopped typing. She was listening, and the look on her face was the look of someone who is recalculating the scale of what they are dealing with in real time. Major Hayes, Morgan said, your testimony. Is it recorded in a format that would be admissible? I am a decorated military officer with 15 years of service and a record prior to my official death that is, I am told, considerably harder to discredit than most witnesses. Her voice carried that almost dry quality again. I recorded my testimony in the format specified by military judicial procedure for field condition witness statements. Yes, Captain Morgan, it is admissible. Morgan looked at Walker. Walker looked at Morgan. And between them, in the space of that look, something was understood that did not need to be said. This woman on the ghost frequency had not simply survived. She had built the case the way a prosecutor builds a case evidence, documentation, chain of custody, admissible testimony. She had done it alone in 6 years of cold and silence, with no guarantee that anyone would ever receive it, and she had done it correctly. Every step, every requirement, because she had understood that a case built incorrectly was a case that the people she was building it against could dismantle, and she was not going to give them that. Second drive, Morgan said, decisive. Give me the key. Ghost 7 gave it. The second drive opened. What came up was not a photograph this time. It was an audio file. A single file, hours long, with a date stamp from 6 years ago and update stamps running in sequence across the entire span of time since. The file was labeled simply Hayes O Personal Record. Don't open the audio here, Ghost 7 said. There is a text index at the beginning. Specific entries are marked by date and subject. The ones marked priority 1 are what Morgan needs for the immediate case. Morgan found the index, scrolled, her eyes moved fast. November 14th, 2019, she read aloud. Contact record. Names Holt and Haddon in direct communication preceding the Silent Horizon attack. Date stamped 12 hours before the unit was compromised. She kept scrolling. March 2020. Financial transfer record observed through communication intercept. Holt's name on originating authorization. Scrolling. August 2021. Operational directive recorded insurgent unit repositioning that correlates with American patrol schedule. Correlation documented. She stopped. This goes on for 6 years. Yes, Ghost 7 said simply. Major haze. Morgan's voice was the steadiest Walker had ever heard it, which for Morgan was saying something. What you have built here, I want to be very clear with you about what this is. This is not circumstantial. This is not a starting point for an investigation. This is a case, a complete admissible prosecutable case. Silence on the frequency. Then I know, Ghost 7 said. I have had 6 years to make sure. Morgan was already transmitting. Fingers moving. Documents going out in encrypted packets to 3 locations that were outside the reach of anything Holt could touch in the next 50 minutes. Walker stood and watched and held the handset and counted time. 38 minutes before Holt's transport landed. Morgan Reyes said from across the room. He was at the window, not looking out, just positioned near it the way a soldier positions near an exit point as a matter of habit. When Holt gets here, what does he have to say? About the investigation? Morgan didn't look up from the terminal. Once the documentation is in independent repositories, very little. The evidence exists regardless of what he says about it. That's the point. She paused, typing for half a second. Personally, he'll say Walker's unit is confused, traumatized, misinterpreting what they found. He'll say Hayes is either an impersonator or mentally compromised from 6 years of isolation. He'll say the documentation was fabricated. He will be very polished and very certain and very impressive when he says all of this. She resumed typing. None of it will matter because the documentation will already be in the hands of 3 independent authorities. And the specific financial records are not the kind of thing you fabricate at field level with field equipment. They are too technically precise, too cross-referenced, too internally consistent over a 6-year span. So we just have to wait out the 50 minutes, Torres said. We have to transmit everything possible in 50 minutes and get Major Hayes' audio testimony flagged and packaged and transmitted separately because it is the keystone, Morgan said. Without her account, the documents are evidence of wrongdoing without a direct witness. With her account, the documents become a prosecutable case against 2 specific individuals, Holt and Haddon, Walker said, and potentially 3 others whose names appear in the documentation at operational decision points, Morgan said. I have flagged them. I'm transmitting the relevant sections now. 26 minutes. The terminal worked steadily. Morgan worked steadily. Webb had his recorder connected to a secondary input that Morgan had set up, transmitting the field documentation from the cache site simultaneously. And then Go 7's voice came through with something different in it, not urgency exactly, but the heightened focus of someone who has just seen something change. Walker, something is happening. He brought the handset up. What? Holt's transport. I have a contact who monitors military air traffic in this region. The transport has not changed course, but a second aircraft has been scrambled from the same origin point. Smaller, faster, a pause. It will arrive 15 minutes before Holt. What's on the second aircraft? I don't know who specifically, but I know the unit designation. It's not administrative staff. Her voice was flat. It is the kind of unit that arrives when someone wants a situation resolved before the official version of events gets complicated by witnesses. The room went very still. Torres turned from the window. Reyes straightened. Webb looked at Walker with the expression of a 22-year-old who has already been through more tonight than he expected to go through in his entire career and has just been informed there is more. How long? Walker said. 35 minutes for the fast transport. Maybe 30. Morgan, Walker said. Timeline. 18 minutes for the priority 1 transmissions to complete, she said. Not looking up, not breaking stride. The full audio testimony takes 32 minutes to transmit at this encryption level. We have 18, maybe 20 minutes before. I know the math, Walker. Her voice was completely calm. The specific calm of a person who has chosen, in this moment, what they are doing and is not going to be moved from it. I am prioritizing accordingly. Walker looked at Reyes. Reyes was looking at the soldiers in the room, at Torres and Webb and the others. at the faces of men who had survived a mountain and were now sitting in a room while someone in the sky moved toward them with an agenda that was not their continued survival. "We need to buy Morgan time," Reyes said. "Yes," Walker agreed. "How?" Walker thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds was all the time that was available. "We walk out," he said. "Us, you, me, Torres, two others. We walk outside, and we make ourselves visible, and we make it look like the complete picture of what's here. We draw attention outward." He looked at Reyes. "Morgan stays inside and keeps transmitting. Webb stays with Morgan because the recording is on Webb's device and is the secondary keystone. Everyone else, we're the distraction," Torres said. "You're the reason they look at the front of the building instead of what's happening inside it," Walker said. "Yes." Torres considered that for about 1 sec. Reyes looked at him. "Walker, if the unit on that transport is what she thinks it is, then we are 20 soldiers with 11 years of service between us and a very clear factual account of being sent to die at an extraction point that command knew was a trap," Walker said. "That is not nothing. That is a lot to explain away publicly." He paused. "And Morgan is transmitting. Every minute we give her is more of the case that exists regardless of what happens to us." Reyes looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," he said, "let's go be visible." Walker turned to the handset one more time. "Go 7. We're going to give Morgan the time she needs." Her response was immediate. "I know, Walker." "Yeah, the families," she said. "Whatever happens in the next 30 minutes. The documentation is already transmitted to the 3 repositories. The 7 names are already in those files. Whatever else happens, that part is done. The families will know." He heard what she was not saying. He heard the version of tonight in which the next 30 minutes did not go cleanly, in which the documents reached their destinations, but the people who had carried them there did not reach a clean ending. He heard it and he did not look away from it. "It's not going to come to that," he said. "But even if it did," a pause. "Even if it did," he said. "I hear you." He set the handset down, looked at Reyes, looked at Torres, looked at the men who were already moving toward the door with the particular quality of purpose that soldiers carry when they have made a decision and stopped questioning it. He followed them. Outside, the early morning had fully arrived. The sky was light in the east, pale and clear, the kind of morning that had no interest in the events happening beneath it. Walker stood in the open and thought about 7 names, thought about a woman on a ridgeline who had learned to disappear and had used that skill not to save herself but to save the truth. Thought about what patience looked like when it was not waiting but building. Inside the building, Morgan's hands moved over the terminal keys. The documentation traveled outward into independent hands. 18 minutes. Every one of them counted. The first transport landed at 712. Walker heard it before he saw it, the specific sound of a military aircraft that was not performing a standard approach, moving too fast, angled too steep, the kind of descent that said whoever was piloting it had been told that time mattered more than procedure. He stood in the open with Reyes on his left and Torres on his right and 4 other soldiers behind them. And he kept his hands visible and his posture deliberate because he understood that the next few minutes were a performance and performances required commitment. Reyes spoke without moving his lips, which was something Walker had never entirely understood how he did, but had long since stopped questioning. 2 vehicles already at the perimeter. They were here before the transport landed. "I see them," Walker said. "That means they had people pre-positioned." "Yes, which means Holt's damage control started before Haddon's call to IG." "Yes." Reyes was quiet for exactly 1 second. "He's been running this a long time." 9 years, Walker said. "Old habits." The transport disgorged 6 individuals in unmarked uniforms, not combat gear, but the kind of deliberately ambiguous dress that sat in the space between official and unofficial, the kind that gave a situation room full of lawyers maximum flexibility about what to call the people wearing it. They moved with the coordinated efficiency of a unit that had worked together before and knew its assignment. Their assignment, Walker understood, was him. The lead individual, mid-40s, the build of someone who had been physically formidable 20 years ago and had maintained enough of it to be credible, walked directly toward Walker with the expression of someone performing authority rather than exercising it. There was a difference. Walker had seen both enough times to recognize which was which. "Captain Walker," the man said, "I'm here to escort your unit to a secure debrief facility." "Walker Nation?" A very brief pause. "Colonel Marsh, Special Operations Liaison." "Which command?" Another pause. "Shorter but present. Joint Special Operations Command." Walker looked at him. "Colonel Marsh." I've submitted a formal request for debrief oversight through Inspector General channels. That request is on record as of approximately 540 this morning. Standard protocol says that request takes precedence over informal escort arrangements. Marsh's expression did not change. The IG request is being processed. In the meantime, given the sensitivity of your unit's operation and the need for immediate secure debrief, General Holt has authorized. General Holt, Walker said, clearly, loudly enough that the soldiers behind him heard it, loudly enough that anyone within 30 feet heard it, is currently the subject of a formal evidentiary submission to the Department of Defense Inspector General, the Senate Services Committee, and a federal prosecutor with military financial crimes jurisdiction. He paused one beat. As of approximately 7 minutes ago, Marsh stopped, not a subtle stop, a complete full-body stop. The kind that happened when a calculation that had been running on one set of assumptions encountered a fact that invalidated the entire equation. Behind Walker, he heard Torres exhale very slowly. Reyes said nothing, but Walker felt him shift his weight very slightly forward, which with Reyes was the equivalent of a full combat-ready posture. Captain Walker. Marsh's voice had changed. Not dramatically, the performance of authority was still there, but the material underneath it had shifted. The way a wall looks the same right up until the moment it doesn't. I don't know what you think you found, but 7 minutes, Walker said. That is how long ago the documentation reached independent hands. I want to be very clear about that timeline, Colonel, because in approximately 20 minutes, General Holt will land on this compound, and when he does, the documentation will have been in independent hands for 27 minutes. Long enough that recalling it is not a technical possibility. He looked at Marsh steadily. Whatever you were sent here to do, the purpose of it no longer exists. Marsh looked at him. Walker looked back. And in the space of that look, something happened Walker had seen happen before in situations where power met a fact it could not absorb: the slow, visible process of a man reassessing which side of a line he was standing on and whether that side was still where he wanted to be. The 6 individuals behind Marsh had not moved, but they had also stopped moving forward, which was its own kind of statement. Walker's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Morgan Priority 1 transmissions complete. All 3 repositories confirmed receipt. Full audio testimony at 63%. Keep them outside. He looked up at Marsh. Would you like to wait, he said, almost gently, for General Holt. I think this conversation benefits from his presence. Marsh said nothing, which was, Walker understood, its own kind of answer. Inside the building, Morgan's hands kept moving. 41 minutes after the first transport landed, the second one did. Walker heard it the same way he had heard the first, by sound, before sight, reading the approach angle and speed and understanding what it meant. This one was slower, more deliberate. The approach of a man who had been doing things his way for 9 years and had no particular reason, as far as he knew, to approach anything differently today. General Marcus Holt stepped off the transport and onto the compound tarmac, and Walker looked at him for the first time in person and felt something that surprised him: not hatred, not fear, not the hot, complicated emotion he had expected. What he felt was something colder and more precise. The specific clarity of a person who has been shown the mechanism behind something terrible and can now see very plainly how it worked. Holt was 61, silver-haired, the bearing of a man who had been told for decades that he was important and had incorporated that information into the structure of how he moved through the world. 2 stars on his uniform, decorations that represented real service once, before the service had become something else. He looked at Walker, at the soldiers behind him, at Marsh standing to the side with an expression that was not quite what Holt had expected to find. Captain Walker, Holt said. His voice was exactly what Walker had expected: the deep, confident, resonant voice of institutional authority. I'm glad your unit is safe. We've been extremely concerned. I know you have, Sir, Walker said. I appreciate the concern. Something in Holt's expression shifted, very slightly. He was reading Walker the same way Walker was reading him, and Walker suspected that what Holt was finding did not match what he had prepared for. He had prepared for a shaken, exhausted captain who had survived a traumatic night and was in need of guidance and direction. He had not prepared for a shaken, exhausted captain who was standing in the open with his hands visible and his posture deliberate and his voice entirely under control. We should get you inside, Holt said, properly debriefed. Your unit has been through an ordeal, and sir. Walker kept his voice respectful, professional, the voice of a soldier addressing a superior officer, which technically Holt still was. Before we proceed to debrief, I want to confirm that you are aware of the formal evidentiary submission made this morning to the DoD Inspector General, the Senate Armed Services Committee, and federal prosecutors. Submission was confirmed complete at approximately 709. Holt looked at him. Not a flicker. The man had 9 years of practice. Walker gave him credit for that. I'm not aware of any such submission, Holt said. You are now, sir, Walker said. A silence settled between them. Not empty. Loaded. The kind of silence that has a shape and a weight, and that both people standing and understand is not really silence at all, but a conversation happening below the level of words. Then Holt's phone rang. He looked at it. His jaw tightened, not much, not visibly to someone who wasn't watching for it, and he stepped away to answer it. Turned his back, spoke in a voice too low to carry. Reyes moved up to Walker's shoulder. Morgan? Walker looked at his phone. A message had arrived 11 seconds ago that he had not been able to read during the exchange with Holt. Morgan, full transmission complete. All documentation and testimony in independent hands. Federal prosecutor's office has already responded. They are treating this as active. Walker, it's done. He read it twice. He did not let his expression change. He did not allow himself the full response that the message deserved, because Holt was still 3 feet away. And whatever the next 60 seconds looked like mattered for reasons that went beyond the immediate moment. But he passed the phone to Reyes, and Reyes read it. And the look on Reyes's face controlled. Professional James Reyes, who had been in hard situations for his entire adult life and had made a practice of not showing things the look on Reyes's face, in the moment he read those words, was something Walker would carry for the rest of his life. It was not triumph. It was not relief. It was something older and more permanent than either. The look of a person who has just learned that something that mattered, that really mattered, had made it through. Reyes handed the phone back without a word. Walker held it. Holt finished his call, turned around, and for the first time, something had changed in his face that the 9 years of practice could not entirely contain. A very small thing, the way a structure looks the same from the outside in the first seconds after the foundation has shifted beneath it. Captain Walker, he said. His voice was the same. His eyes were different. I think we should have a conversation. I agree, sir, Walker said. I think we should have it with Inspector General representation present. Holt looked at him for a long moment. And then, because 9 years had taught him nothing, if not how to read a situation for what it actually was rather than what he wished it to be, he nodded. Fine, he said, one word. But it contained, Walker understood, the beginning of the end of something that had been operating in the dark for 9 years. Not the complete end that would take time, and lawyers, and formal proceedings, and the grinding institutional process of accountability that moved slowly and imperfectly and sometimes failed. Walker was not naive about that. He had seen enough of the world to know that justice was not a clean or guaranteed thing. But the documentation was out. The testimony was in independent hands. The 7 names were in the record. And a man who had believed himself untouchable was standing on a tarmac at 7:53 in the morning, nodding at a captain he had sent to die, because the alternative to nodding was worse than the nodding, and he knew it. It was not everything. It was enough to be the beginning of everything. Inside the building, Morgan walked out and stood beside Walker, and the 3 of them, Walker, Reyes. Morgan watched Holt move toward a formal conversation that none of his preparation for this morning had included. Torres materialized on Walker's other side, said very quietly, "Is it over?" "The easy part," Walker said. Torres absorbed that. There was an easy part. Walker almost smiled. This was the easy part, yes. Torres considered that for a moment. Then okay, good to know. Then Walker's radio crackled, the ghost frequency. Everyone who was standing close enough to hear it went still. Morgan, who had not heard the frequency directly until this moment, looked at the handset on Walker's belt with the specific expression of someone who's about to hear something they have been adjacent to all morning and are only now going to encounter directly. Walker unclipped it, pressed the handset to his ear. Ghost 7. It's done. Full transmission confirmed. Federal prosecutor is active. Morgan's here. Holt is... He paused because the right word for what Holt currently was took a moment to find. Holt is contained. The frequency was quiet for 4 seconds. Then her voice came through, and it sounded different from every previous transmission. Not different in quality, the signal was the same, the clarity was the same. Different in the way that a voice sounds different when the thing that has been held inside it for 6 years has just been given somewhere to go. Confirmed, she said. Just that one word. But the way she said it, Morgan leaned slightly toward the handset. Walker held it between them. Major Hayes, Morgan said, from a legal standpoint, your testimony is the keystone of this case. The federal prosecutor is going to want to speak with you. Formally, on record. A pause, I know. That means coming in, Morgan said carefully. Coming in officially, through proper channels. Which means existing again, Ghost 7 said yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Walker waited. He did not push. He understood in the way that he had understood things about her all night by listening to what was underneath the words rather than just the words themselves, that this was not a simple decision. 6 years of a particular kind of existence did not simply stop because the reason for it had been resolved. A person who had learned to live without a name in any living record, who had built a life in the cold and the silence around the act of carrying 7 names and one truth, that person did not step back across the line into official existence without feeling the weight of what it meant. Walker, she said. Yeah, the 7 names. Mercer, Kowalski, Baptiste Fong, Ramirez, Webb, Cole. A pause. Are they actually in the record now? Officially. Not buried in a file somewhere. Walker looked at Morgan. Morgan nodded. Slowly, deliberately. Because she understood what was being asked and she was not going to answer it lightly. They are in the evidentiary submission to 3 independent authorities, she said clearly into the handset. Their names are in the official file record as victims of an ordered action, not enemy contact. That designation is now part of the formal investigative record. It cannot be removed without generating a documented modification trail. She paused. The families will be notified through official channels within 48 hours. The record will be corrected. Their names will not disappear again. The frequency was silent for 8 seconds. Walker counted everyone. Then very quietly, just okay. But the way she said it, he had to look away for a moment. Not from anything visible, from something internal, some pressure that had been building since the first moment he heard her voice in that frozen trench and had been accumulating through every hour since, and was now at 801 on a morning that had started in the worst possible place and arrived somewhere he had not dared to project toward, requiring him to look somewhere other than the handset for about 4 seconds while he reestablished the kind of control that 11 years had trained him to maintain. Reyes watched him do it and said nothing, and looked the other direction, which was the most respectful thing he had ever done for Walker in 4 years of service together. Then Walker looked back at the handset. Ghost 7, he said. Come in. We'll meet you wherever you are. We'll bring you in through proper channels with Morgan's authority as cover and my unit as witness. Nobody touches you without going through 20 soldiers who have every reason to make that very difficult. A pause, a long walk, she said. We'll come to you, he said. A sound from the frequency that was not quite a laugh and was not quite the absence of one, somewhere between. The sound of a person who had forgotten that they were allowed certain responses and was briefly remembering. Give me 24 hours, she said. I need to. There are things I need to do. Before I come in, a pause. I have been living a certain way for 6 years. Some of it needs to be properly ended before I start something else. 24 hours, Walker said. I'll be at this frequency. I know you will, she said. And then the frequency went quiet. The 24 hours that followed were the strangest of Walker's career, which was saying something because his career had contained some very strange stretches of time. Holt was taken into a formal interview process that involved 3 IG representatives, 2 JAG officers, and a federal prosecutor who had flown overnight to be physically present, which told Walker something about how seriously the prosecutor's office was treating the documentation Morgan had transmitted. Haddon was detained at Forward Operations Command pending formal investigation. Marsh, after a conversation with a JAG officer that apparently lasted 40 minutes, provided a voluntary statement that Walker was not privy to but that Reyes later described, based on the JAG officer's expression afterward, as comprehensive. Okafor came through surgery at 1,140. Chen called Walker from the medical facility where Farhan had taken him, and the call was short because Chen was not a man who used more words than a situation required, and what the situation required was, he made it. He's asking for coffee, which the doctors say is a good sign, and also he wants to know if we're all alive, which I told him yes. Walker said tell him yes from me specifically, and Chen said will do, and that was the whole call. Webb spent most of the day in a secure room with 2 IG investigators going through his field recorder frame by frame, timestamp by timestamp, and emerged at 1,800 looking like he had aged 3 years, and also like he had done something that mattered, which Walker had come to understand were often the same expression. Morgan did not stop working. Walker checked on her twice, both times finding her at a terminal with a fresh coffee, and the specific quality of focus that she maintained when she was doing something she considered genuinely important, which Morgan did not apply to things she considered merely important. She had the full documentation open across 3 screens and was building the formal evidentiary brief with the precision and thoroughness of someone who understood that how a case was built determined whether it survived the people who wanted to dismantle it. At 2130, she found Walker in the hallway outside her office. "The 7 names," she said. "I want to tell you what I found when I went deeper into the record." He looked at her. "The families," she said. Most of them were told the standard notification. Killed in action, enemy contact, classified operation. 2 of the families, Mercer's family and Cole's family, had submitted formal inquiries in the years since, requesting more information, questioning the official account. She paused. Those inquiries were administratively closed each time, marked as resolved. They were not resolved. They were silenced. Walker looked at the wall for a moment, then back at her. "The families knew something was wrong," he said. "Yes," Morgan said, "the way families sometimes know. Not with evidence. Just with the feeling that the story they were given did not have the shape of a true story." She looked at him directly. "I am personally going to call each family, not through a notification chain. Personally. I want them to hear it from a human being who can answer their questions, not from a formal letter." Walker looked at her for a long moment. "That's going to be a hard set of calls," he said. "Yes," she said simply. "It is. They deserve hard calls made by someone who is willing to make them." He nodded. Didn't say anything else, because there was nothing else needed. He went back to the ghost frequency. He kept it open all night. The next morning arrived at 600 and Walker was still awake, which was not unusual for him at this point in a situation that had been running for almost 30 hours on adrenaline and purpose, and the specific refusal to let go of something until it was finished. At 623, the frequency crackled.
"Captain Walker."
He had the handset in his hand before the second syllable finished. "Here," he said. "I'm coming down," she said, from the north approach. "There's a road that Farhan uses. He will meet me at the base of the mountain in 40 minutes and bring me in." Walker sat up straighter. "I'll be at the perimeter." "Walker," a pause. "I want to ask you something before I come in." "Anything, the family," she said. "When they are notified, I want to be the one who tells them about the last hours, about what the team was doing, about the fact that they found the truth and tried to report it, about the fact that what happened to them was not random and was not their fault and was not a failure on their part." Her voice was steady and controlled, and underneath it was 6 years of mournings and 7 names carried like a private religion. "I want to be the one who tells them that. Not a letter, not a notification chain, me." "Morgan is already planning to call them personally," Walker said. "Morgan can tell them the official facts," she said. "I will tell them what it was actually like. What David Mercer was like. What Sarah Kowalski said on the last morning. What Kevin Cole, 22 years old, second deployment, what he was thinking about when things went wrong." A pause. "Those are things that only I know. And those families deserve to know them." Walker held the handset and felt something move through him that was not simple and was not clean, and that he did not try to name. The full weight of what she had carried. Not the evidence, not the case, the other part. The part that was not admissible in any court and was not transmittable to any repository, but that had also been carried alone for 6 years, the specific memories of 7 people that existed now in one living mind and would cease to exist when that mind was gone unless they were passed on to the people who had the most right to hold them. "I'll make sure you get to talk to them," he said. "You have my word." A silence, 40 minutes. "I'll be there," he said. 41 minutes later, a vehicle came through the northern perimeter road. Walker was standing at the gate with Reyes and Torres and Webb, all 4 of them. Because the 4 of them were the ones who had been closest to all of it. And none of them had needed to discuss whether they would be there. It had simply been understood. Farhan got out of the driver's side and nodded at Walker with the same quiet efficiency that characterized everything he did. And then the passenger door opened. She was taller than he had imagined. He realized he had not consciously formed an image of her during the entire night, which was unusual for him. He was a visual person. He built pictures of people from their voices. But with her, the voice had been so completely itself, so fully occupying the space of who she was, that there had been no room for an imagined image alongside it. She simply was the voice, And now the voice was attached to a person who was standing on solid ground in the early morning light. And the two things were taking a moment to reconcile. She was in her early 40s. She looked like someone who had spent 6 years outside in conditions that were not gentle. She looked like someone who had not slept enough and had eaten adequately, but not generously, and had carried weight that was not physical for a very long time. She looked like someone who was simultaneously more tired and more present than anyone Walker had met in years. She looked at Walker. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then he put his hand out, the way soldiers do. Direct, clear, carrying more than a handshake carries in civilian life, but not requiring words to carry it. She looked at his hand. Then she shook it. Her grip was firm and certain, and just briefly held on a half-second longer than a formal handshake would require, which was the only external sign she gave of what the moment contained for her, and he recognized it for exactly what it was, and matched it, and then released. Because some things are acknowledged and then moved past, not because they don't matter, but because they matter too much to reduce to extended ceremony. Major Hayes, he said. Captain Walker, she said. Reyes stepped forward, extended his hand. She shook it. Torres, who had apparently decided that the moment called for something slightly different, said, "Ma'am, for what it's worth, best sniper I've ever had the privilege of being protected by." She looked at him, and something happened at the corner of her mouth that was the beginning of a smile, not the whole thing. Not yet, but the first indication that the architecture, for one, still existed somewhere in there, and that it might, given time and the right conditions, complete itself. "You didn't see a single shot," she said. "No, ma'am," Torres agreed. "That's how I knew." Webb stepped forward. He looked at her with the eyes of a 22-year-old who had spent all night carrying something heavier than his recorder and all morning understanding more fully what it had been. "The name on my recorder," he said. "Thomas Webb, one of your team. Same last name as me." She looked at him. "It's a common name," she said. But she kept looking at him. Like the coincidence, common or not, meant something that the word coincidence did not quite cover. "Yes, ma'am," Webb said. They looked at each other for a moment. Then she said, "He would have liked you. He was the best communication specialist I ever worked with. He was also 23 years old." Webb swallowed. "I'll do him proud, ma'am." She looked at him for one more second, then nodded slowly. Morgan came out of the building and crossed the distance between them with the brisk, direct energy that characterized everything she did. She looked at Olivia Hayes, because she was Olivia Hayes now here, on official ground, in the light of a morning that was going to require many things of her that the mountains had not. And the two women looked at each other with the mutual recognition of people who have been described to each other, and are now confirming that the descriptions were accurate. "Major Hayes," Morgan said, "I've spoken with the federal prosecutor's office this morning. They consider your testimony central to the case. They have requested an in-person interview at your earliest convenience." She paused. "They also asked me to tell you that the documentation you compiled is, in their words, among the most thorough they have encountered in a case of this type." Olivia Hayes looked at her. "6 years," she said simply. "Yes," Morgan said, "I know." And she said it like she actually did know, not the literal experience of it, but the weight of it, the understanding of what it had cost. "The family," she added. "I called 3 of them this morning. Early, I thought it better not to wait." She stopped, looked at Olivia directly. "They asked about you. When I told them you were alive and were the one who had preserved their loved ones' stories, all 3 of them asked if they could speak with you." Olivia Hayes did not respond immediately. She was looking at a point slightly past Morgan's shoulder, not distracted, internal, processing something that had been abstract for 6 years, the families, always the reason, and was now becoming concrete and immediate and real in a way that abstraction could not fully prepare you for. "Yes," she said. "I'll speak with them." A breath. All of them. Walker stood back and let the morning unfold around him. Watched Morgan guide Olivia toward the building and the formal process that waited inside it. Watched Reyes follow. Watched Webb fall into step with the quiet purposefulness of someone who had decided somewhere in the last 30 hours exactly what kind of soldier he intended to be. Torres appeared at Walker's shoulder. "What happens now?" he said, genuinely curious. "Just asking." "Now the slow part," Walker said. "Investigations. Proceedings. All the institutional machinery that moves the way institutional machinery moves. Long, probably." Torres considered that. "But it moves." "It moves," Walker said. Torres nodded. looked at the building where Olivia Hayes had just walked through a door that led back into official existence after 6 years of standing outside it. She going to be okay? Walker thought about the question honestly, the way the question deserved. She's going to be different kinds of okay than she was before, he said. The mountains were her version of okay, and this is going to be a different version. But she is, he paused. She is someone who learned to carry an enormous weight for a very long time and do it with her hands steady. That kind of person finds ways to be okay that other people can't always see. Torres thought about that. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, that tracks. 3 months later, Walker returned to Afghanistan. Not as a commander, not on official assignment. He took leave, real leave, the kind that the Army periodically demanded of soldiers who had not taken enough of it, and he traveled back to the region with the ghost radio in his bag and the 7 names in his memory and a question he had been carrying since the morning she walked through the gate. He found a high place, the kind of place where the signal was clear. He activated the frequency, Ghost 7, this is Raven Actual. He waited, static. He had not expected anything else, not really. She was not on the mountain anymore. She was in Washington in formal proceedings, giving testimony that was systematically and permanently undoing 9 years of deliberate silence. She was on the phone with families who had waited 6 years for a true account of what happened to people they loved. She was existing again, officially, in the record Major Olivia Hayes, status corrected, service record restored, alive. He kept the channel open anyway. The wind moved through, cold and clean. The same wind that had moved through the night she guided 20 men through the dark. And then faint, so faint he almost missed it. The way you almost miss the thing you have been most hoping for because some part of you does not dare to fully believe in it yet. Captain Walker, he closed his hand around the handset. You're not supposed to be on this frequency anymore, she said. And there it was, the thing that had been at the very edge of every transmission all those months ago, the thing that had almost shown itself once or twice and then pulled back. The actual complete, unguarded humor of a person who had spent 6 years without enough reasons to use it and was now slowly finding them again. I'm officially alive. I have an official phone number. Morgan gave it to you. She did, Walker said. I wanted to use this one. A pause. Then how is the mountain? Cold, he said. Clear, the same as it always is, I imagine. It is, she said. Always the same. That is the thing I miss most about it, I think. Nothing changes up there based on what people do in offices and courtrooms. How is the courtroom? Slow, she said. And necessary. And slow, a pause. Holt's legal team is what you would expect from someone with his resources. But the documentation is what it is. You cannot argue with 6 years of documentation. You can delay it. You cannot argue with it. The families? A silence, the kind that was full rather than empty. Mercer's wife called me last week, she said. Not about the case. Just to talk. We talked for 2 hours about David. About what he was like, about the things he said, and the way he led, and the person he was before he was an official casualty in an official report. Her voice stayed steady, and underneath it was something that had been processing and healing in the slow, nonlinear way that grief processes and heals. She said she felt like she got part of him back, not him, but the part that the official account had taken away, which was the truth of what happened to him, the fact that he was trying to do the right thing at the end. A pause. She said, thank you. And I didn't know what to say to that, because thanking me felt like it had the wrong shape. So I just said he deserved better. And she said, yes, but at least now we know. Walker sat with that. At least now we know. 6 years of cold mornings and 7 names and the absolute refusal to let the wrong record stand. 6 years of patience that was not waiting but building. 6 years that had led to this, not a perfect outcome, not a clean or guaranteed justice, but families who knew the truth. Names that were in the correct column of the correct record. 7 people who had been called casualties of enemy action and were now called what they actually were, people who found the truth and tried to protect it and were sacrificed by the people who wanted the truth buried. At least now we know. It was not everything. It was the most important thing. Olivia, he said. Her name direct for the first time. Not Go 7, not Major Hayes, Olivia. A pause. Like the name itself required a moment to land properly after 6 years of nobody saying it. Walker, she said. Are you coming home? After the proceeding. When the formal part is done. A long silence, the kind that had no anxiety in it. The considered silence of a person who is taking a question seriously enough to actually think about it, rather than reflexively answering. I have been trying to work out, she said slowly. What home means for someone who has been away from it the way I have been away from it. Whether it is a place or a set of people, or a way of moving through the world? She paused. I don't have a clean answer yet. That's okay, Walker said. I have a partial one, she said. I'll take partial. Partial is, it is not the mountain. I love the mountain. I will always love the mountain because the mountain kept me alive and kept me honest and gave me the only thing I needed, which was enough time to do what needed to be done. But it is not home. Another pause. Home is something I have not had in 6 years. Learning to have it again is. She stopped, darted again. It is not a simple thing, but I am working on it. That's enough, Walker said. Working on it is enough. The frequency was quiet for a moment. The wind moved through it. Then the families, she said. Once the proceedings are done, I want to go see them. In person. Not phone calls. I want to sit across from them and tell them the parts I couldn't put in a legal document. The things that only I know. I want the people who love them to have everything there is to have. I'll go with you, Walker said. If you want company. Pause, might she said. And then something shifted in her voice, barely, just barely, the way the light shifts at the very start of dawn before it is fully committed to becoming day. Yes, I think I would like that. Walker looked out at the mountains that had no public names and held their secrets patiently and kept their watch over everything that moved through them, regardless of whether the moving things survived or disappeared. And he thought about all the things those mountains had held and held still 7 names. One survivor, 6 years of silence that had turned out to be the loudest possible answer to the people who had counted on it being permanent. He thought about what Farhan had said, the most patient person I have ever met. He thought about what she had told Webb. You stay angry. Anger is useful. It keeps you warm when nothing else will. He thought about a group photograph. 8 people. Mountain backdrop. 7 of them laughing at something outside the frame. One of them looking directly at the camera. He thought about a woman who had learned to disappear and had used every skill that disappearing taught her not to stay gone, but to come back, not for herself, not for recognition, not because anyone told her to, but because the record was wrong and wrong records were something that certain people simply could not tolerate. And he pressed transmit one final time on the frequency that was supposed to have been silent for 6 years and said, Olivia Hayes. For what it's worth, you are the finest soldier I have ever had the privilege of serving alongside. The wind moved through the static. Then, clear and steady and carrying underneath it the beginning of something that sounded like a future. Don't get sentimental on me, Captain, he smiled. Fully, the kind that he had not managed in a very long time. And Olivia Hayes, who had been a ghost for 6 years and was learning, one deliberate day at a time, how to be a living person again, Olivia Hayes, who had carried 7 names like a private obligation and had honored every single one of them, Olivia Hayes, who had broken the silence on a forbidden frequency on the worst night of a good man's career and guided 20 soldiers out of the dark, was somewhere she had not been since before the mountain, which was on the other end of a conversation with someone who knew her name and was glad she was alive. The ghost had come home, not because she was ordered to, not because someone needed a weapon, but because 7 people deserved to be remembered correctly, and she had made sure they were. And now finally, on the other side of the longest and hardest thing she had ever done, she had given herself permission to put the weight down and learn what came next. The frequency stayed open. The mountains kept their watch. And the silence, when it finally came, was the right kind. The kind that meant everything necessary had been said.